Welcome back, legends. And if you're new here, welcome to the ultimate world of magical what if fanfictions. This channel isn't just about retelling stories. Here, we explore alternate destinies, power awakenings, and the darkest secrets of the wizarding world that were never revealed. Quick note before we begin: every story on this channel is originally written, creatively edited, and reimagined purely for storytelling and entertainment purposes, so each video delivers a fresh experience. Want to skip the intro? Jump straight to 1 minute to dive into today's main twist. And if you enjoy powerful Harry Potter alternate stories, make sure to hit subscribe, because we upload daily magical what if videos you won't want to miss. In today's video, we ask a single question: what if the DMLE rescued Harry Potter at age 8 and Amelia Bones raised him into a powerful wizard? One that could change Harry Potter's fate forever. Let's begin.
Chapter 1: The Boy in the Cupboard. The air in the hallway was always thick. Thick with the smell of lemon polish and fried bacon and something else, something bitter that clung to the back of the throat. Dust. Silence. The kind of silence that wasn't quiet at all, but heavy, waiting to be broken by the wrong sound. Harry Potter knew about wrong sounds. He was curled in his cupboard, knees pressed to his chest, counting the spiders moving across the slats above him. 8. There were 8. Aunt Petunia had dusted just yesterday, but they always came back. He liked them. They were quiet. They didn't shout. They didn't look at his forehead and make that face, the one that was equal parts fear and furious disgust. The scar prickled. It did that sometimes, a faint, hot itch behind the skin. He pressed the heel of his hand against it, willing the sensation away. Making things stop by wanting it badly enough was his best trick, his only trick. The glass at the zoo, the teacher's wig turning blue, he squeezed his eyes shut. Don't think about it. Bad things happened when he thought about it. A floorboard creaked overhead. Uncle Vernon's weight, shifting in his armchair. The television droned through the ceiling, a steady murmur of news and laughter. Normal sounds. Family sounds. They were not for him. His stomach growled, a hollow ache. Dinner had been a slice of dry bread and a bit of cheese. Dudley's birthday was tomorrow. There would be presents, a mountain of them, and a cake so large it would barely fit on the table. Harry would be expected to help in the kitchen, to stay out of sight, to be grateful for the extra chores. He already was. Grateful meant they might forget he was there for a little while. A sharp rapping on the front door shattered the hallway's thick quiet. Harry flinched, his head bumping the shelf above him. A can of paint thinner wobbled. He held his breath. The television went silent. Heavy footsteps crossed the living room. Who on earth? Aunt Petunia's voice, sharp as a needle. The door opened. The air changed. It wasn't just the draft from the street. It was a feeling, a charge, like the moment before lightning strikes. Harry felt the hair on his arms rise. Good evening. The voice was a woman's. Clear, calm. It didn't ask, it simply was. Amelia Bones, Department of Magical Law Enforcement. This is Auror Dawlish. We're here for Harry Potter. Magic. The word exploded in Harry's mind even though she hadn't said it. Magical Law Enforcement. This was about the odd things. The vanishing glass. They'd finally come to take him away, to lock him up for being a freak. Uncle Vernon's bluster filled the hall. I don't know what you're talking about. There's no Harry Potter here. This is a private residence. The trace, the woman, Amelia Bones, cut through his sputtering. A magical alert. It registered a significant, underage magical surge at this address approximately 6 hours ago. A Reparaforce charm. Advanced healing magic. Performed by a child. Harry's breath caught. 6 hours ago. Dudley's gang, chase Harry. He'd tripped on the curb, torn his knee open on gravel. The pain had been a white-hot shock. He'd clutched it, tears blurring his vision, wishing with every fiber of his being for the blood to stop, for the skin to knit back together. And it had. The skin had smoothed over, leaving only a pink mark and a stunned, sick feeling in his stomach. He'd run, then, faster than ever. They'd seen it. They knew. Preposterous. Aunt Petunia shrieked. We are normal, law-abiding people. We have no magic under this roof. Your sister did, Amelia Bones said, and her voice, for the first time, was not calm. It was a blade of ice. Lily Evans. Your nephew carries her blood. And, according to our records, he has been in your care since October of 1981. We are here to perform a welfare check, as mandated by the Child Welfare and Magical Guardian Act of 1689. Step aside. There was a scuffle, a choked sound from Vernon. A new voice, a man's, or Dawlish, muttered something short. The resistance melted away into terrified silence. Footsteps entered the house. They were measured, firm on the parquet floor. They stopped in the hallway. Harry pressed himself into the corner of his cupboard, heart hammering against his ribs. The lock on his door was a simple bolt, but it felt as flimsy as paper now. "Where is he, Mrs. Dursley?" Silence. "The cupboard," Aunt Petunia whispered, the word dripping with shame. "He's in the cupboard under the stairs." A shadow blocked the thin line of light under the door. A hand, slender but strong-looking, with neat, short nails, appeared. The bolt slid back with a soft clack. The door opened. Light from the hall lamp fell across two figures. A tall, severe-looking woman with a monocle gleaming over one eye, her gray hair in a tight bun, wearing robes of deep navy. Behind her, a broad-shouldered man with a stern face, his hand resting lightly on a long, polished stick of wood at his belt. But Harry's eyes were fixed on the woman. Amelia Bones. She didn't look like a social worker. She looked like a general. Her gaze swept over the cramped, dark space. The thin mattress. The shelf of cleaning supplies. The childish drawings of a family of 4, none of whom looked like him, tacked to the wall with yellowing tape. Her expression, already stern, turned to granite. The air around her seemed to grow colder. Then her eyes found him, huddled in the back. They weren't angry. They were assessing, taking in his oversized, holey shirt, his bony knees, the fear in his own eyes reflected in her monocle. "Harry," she said. Her voice had changed again. It was quieter, softer, but no less firm. "My name is Amelia. We've come to take you somewhere safe." He couldn't speak. His throat was sealed shut. Safe. The word was foreign, a sound with no meaning. Uncle Vernon found his voice from the living room doorway, his face a purplish red. "Now see here. You can't just take him. He's our responsibility." A nasty, ungrateful little. Amelia Bones turned her head a single inch. She didn't raise her voice. "You have housed a magical child in a cupboard. You have hidden him from his heritage. You have, by the state of him, neglected his basic needs. You are fortunate I am not arresting you where you stand for magical endangerment and abuse. Another word, and I will reconsider." Vernon's jaw snapped shut. She looked back at Harry. "You have nothing to fear from us, Harry. We are from the Ministry of Magic. Your parents were magical, like you. They were heroes. Magic. Parents. Heroes." The words swirled in his head, too big to grasp. "Can you stand?" she asked. He uncurled, limbs stiff. He shuffled forward, out of the cupboard, into the light of the hallway. He felt exposed, like a creature dragged from under a rock. He kept his eyes on the floor, on the woman's sensible, polished boots. Aunt Petunia was crying, but they were hard, angry tears. Dudley peered from behind her, his piggy eyes wide with confusion and a dawning disappointment that his punching bag was leaving. Amelia Bones knelt. It was a slow, deliberate movement, bringing her eye level with him. She didn't smell like lemon polish or bacon. She smelled like rain, and parchment, and something sharp and clean. "It's over," she said, and the words were a promise, solid as stone. "You're coming home." She offered her hand, not to grab him, but to take, if he chose. Harry stared at it, at the clean lines, the lack of dirt under the nails. His own hand was small, grubby, curled into a fist at his side. Home. He didn't know what that was. But the cupboard door was open behind him. The bitter air of the Dursley house pressed on his back. Slowly, trembling, he uncurled his fingers and placed his hand in hers. Her grip was warm. It was steady. It did not let go. "Or Dawlish," she said, rising, pulling Harry gently to stand beside her. "Collect his things." Dawlish peered into the cupboard. "Ma'am, he doesn't appear to have any things." Amelia Bones's jaw tightened. "Then we are done here." She led Harry toward the front door. As they passed the living room, he saw the Dursleys, a frozen tableau of fear and rage. He expected a shout, a last-minute curse. But they were silent, cowed by the magic in the air, by the authority in the woman's spine. They stepped out into the cool, damp night of Privet Drive. A sleek, black car that looked both ordinary and utterly strange sat at the curb. "Just a short ride," Amelia said, guiding him toward it. "Then we'll travel another way." He looked back, once, at number 4. The neat lawn, the dark windows. It had never been a home. It had been a sentence. And the sentence was over. As Dawlish opened the car door, Amelia placed a hand on Harry's thin shoulder. "Brace yourself, Harry. Your life is about to change completely." The car engine purred to life, a sound of sleek, impossible power. He slid into the leather seat, which seemed to swallow him whole. Amelia sat beside him, a solid, unwavering presence. They pulled away from the curb. The house shrunk in the back window, becoming just another box in a row of identical boxes. The streetlights blurred into streaks of gold. He was free. And he was more terrified than he had ever been in his cupboard. Because now, there were no locks between him and the vast, unknown world that had sent this woman. A world of magic. A world that knew his name. The car turned a corner, and Privet Drive vanished from sight. Chapter 2, The Bones of the Matter. The car didn't drive so much as it slid through the London night, swallowing the streets in a silent, dark gullet. Harry watched the city lights smear past the window, his reflection a pale ghost overlaid on the bustling world. He didn't speak. Amelia Bones didn't either, but her silence wasn't empty. It was full of a fierce, protective attention. He could feel her gaze on him, not staring, but watching, like she was mentally cataloging every bruise, every too-sharp angle. Dawlish drove, his eyes occasionally flicking to the rear-view mirror, checking the road, checking on them. The stick of wood, a wand, Harry's mind supplied, the word bubbling up from some hidden well, lay on the passenger seat beside him. After 20 minutes, they pulled into a deserted, grimy alley behind what looked like an abandoned theater. Dawlish killed the engine. The silence was absolute. "Ready?" Amelia asked Harry. He nodded, though he wasn't. All three got out. The alley smelled of wet brick and garbage. Amelia drew her wand from inside her robes. It was smooth, dark wood, unadorned. She tapped a specific sequence on a brick in the wall. The brick shivered, then began to rotate, followed by its neighbors, folding inward like a camera's aperture, until a perfect archway stood where solid wall had been. Beyond it, a cobbled street lit by floating balls of golden gaslight stretched into a misty, impossible distance. The leaky cauldron. The sign above the archway creaked in a non-existent breeze. Warm light and the rumble of chatter spilled out. "Stay close," Amelia said, and her hand found his shoulder again. It was becoming an anchor. They stepped through. The archway sealed itself behind them with a soft crunch of bricks. The pub fell. Silent. Every head turned. A sea of faces, strange and wonderful and terrifying. A man with a twisted, gnarled face. A woman with vibrant purple hair. A group of witches in pointed hats, their conversation dying on their lips. All eyes were on him. Whispers slithered through the air like snakes. "Is that Potter? Look at his scar. Amelia Bones has got him." Amelia's grip tightened. She didn't glare, but her posture shifted, becoming a shield. She gave a short, sharp nod to the barman, a stooped old fellow named Tom, whose eyes were wide with astonishment. Then she guided Harry straight through the pub, not stopping, not acknowledging the stares. The crowd parted for her as if by magnetic force. Out the back door, into a small, walled courtyard. Here, she used her wand again, tapping specific bricks in the high wall. They rippled and rearranged, forming an archway far grander than the one in the alley. It opened onto a scene that made Harry's breath stop in his chest. Diagon Alley. It was a canyon of wonder. Shops stacked crookedly, leaning on each other for support, their windows glowing with displays of cauldrons, broomsticks, glittering jewels, and cages of extraordinary creatures. Owls swooped between chimneys. People in robes of every color jostled and chatted. The air smelled of ozone, warm bread, burnt sugar, and 100 other things he couldn't name. "This is the wizarding world, Harry," Amelia said, her voice low beside him. "Your world." It was too much. The colors were too bright, the sounds too loud, the sheer scale of it all pressed in on him. He'd spent his life in a cupboard, in a small, gray house, on a small, gray street. This was a roaring, living galaxy. He felt himself shutting down, his vision tunneling. "Breathe," Amelia commanded, not unkindly. "In through your nose. Out through your mouth." He obeyed, the air shuddering into his lungs. "We're not staying long tonight. Just one stop. She steered him down the cobbles, past gawking witches and wizards who pointed and whispered. Harry kept his eyes on the back of Dalish's robes, a dark blue beacon in the chaos. They stopped at a shop that looked more like a fortress than a store. Gringot's Wizarding Bank. Snow-white marble, bronze doors, and a creature so sharp and fierce-looking it made Vernon seem cuddly. A goblin, dressed in fine crimson and gold, with long fingers and dark, calculating eyes, stood between the doors. Amelia approached. Madam Bones, the goblin rasped, giving a slight, grudging bow. The Potter account. And the Bones family vault, Griphook. The boy is now under my guardianship. We need to establish access and retrieve the Potter heir ring. Griphook's eyes gleamed. Follow me. The cart ride through the marble tunnels was a nightmare of speed and screaming turns, deeper and deeper into the earth. Harry clutched the sides, his stomach left somewhere far above. Amelia sat rigidly upright, unfazed. They plummeted to a stop before a towering vault door. Griphook placed his long hand on the metal, and it melted away with a sound like grinding stone. Light spilled out. Not just the flicker of torches, but a blinding, glorious, golden light. Gold. Mountains of gold coins. Stacks and stacks of them. Piles of silver. Heaps of bronze. And between them, chests overflowing with jewels, gleaming artifacts, armor, books bound in strange leathers. Harry stood at the threshold, paralyzed. He'd never seen a single gold coin in his life. Here was an empire of them. The Potter family fortune, Amelia said, her voice echoing in the vast space. Your inheritance, Harry. But this, she walked to a small, ornate pedestal holding a single velvet cushion, is more important right now. On the cushion sat a ring. It was heavy-looking, made of a dark, unreflective metal. Its crest was a shield with a stylized lion and a lightning bolt. It hummed with a low, warm power. The Potter heir ring. It will recognize your blood. When you put it on, it will bind to you. It offers some protections, and it tells the world who you are. You don't have to wear it yet. But you should have it. She lifted the ring. Give me your hand. He extended his left hand, trembling. She didn't put the ring on his finger. Instead, she held it just above his skin. The ring grew warm. The metal seemed to soften, to glow faintly. Then, of its own accord, it slipped onto his ring finger. It resized itself, fitting perfectly, comfortably. The warmth spread up his arm, a feeling not of power, but of recognition. A key sliding into a lock he never knew existed. He was Harry James Potter. Son of James and Lily. Heir. The weight of it, the truth of it, settled into his bones, heavier than all the gold in the vault. Griphook watched with a predatory interest. The vault will respond to his touch now. And yours, Madam Bones, as his magical guardian. They left the gold behind. The ride back up was a blur. Back in Diagon Alley, the ring felt strange on his finger, a constant, cool reminder. They didn't return through the leaky cauldron. Amelia led him to a small, blank wall between two shops. This is a private entrance. For ministry officials and their families. Place your hand here. He pressed his palm to the brick. The ring tingled. The wall shimmered and became a familiar black car door. They stepped through into the back seat of the same car, now parked in a different, clean, well-lit underground garage. Where are we? Harry asked, finding his voice at last. It was a small, rough sound. The Ministry of Magic. Our next stop is my home. But first, there's someone you need to meet. Officially. They took an elevator that moved sideways. They walked down corridors of peacock blue tile, past witches and wizards who nodded respectfully to Amelia, their eyes widening as they saw the small, ragged boy trailing her, the ring gleaming on his hand. She stopped before a door with a plaque, Director, Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Inside was not an office, but a comfortable sitting room. A fire crackled in the hearth. And in a large, cushioned chair by the fire, a small girl with long, silvery blonde hair was reading a thick book. She looked up as they entered. She had large, pale eyes that seemed to see everything at once. She was about his age, maybe a year younger. She looked peaceful. Susan, Amelia said, her voice softening into something Harry hadn't heard before. A warmth that made something ache in his chest. This is Harry Potter. Harry, this is my niece, Susan Bones. Susan closed her book carefully. She didn't stare at his scar. She looked at his eyes, then at the ring on his finger, then back to his eyes. She smiled. It was a gentle, quiet smile. Hello, Harry, she said. Auntie said you might be coming. I made cocoa. On the low table between the chairs, 2 steaming mugs waited. Harry looked from Susan's kind face to Amelia's stern, expectant one, to the warm fire, to the cocoa. The ring was heavy on his finger. The gold was a distant memory. The cupboard was a lifetime away. This was a different kind of magic. A terrifying, fragile, hopeful kind. Amelia gave him a small push toward the empty chair. Sit, Harry. You're home now. He walked forward, each step feeling like it was on a tightrope over an abyss. He sat in the chair opposite Susan. It was soft. It enveloped him. He wrapped his hands around the warm mug, the heat seeping into his cold fingers. Susan took a sip of her cocoa, watching him over the rim. It's not poisoned, she said, her eyes twinkling. I promise. A laugh, rusty and unexpected, bubbled in Harry's throat. It didn't come out, but the knot in his chest loosened, just a little. He was in a room with a fire. With cocoa. With people who knew about magic and didn't call him a freak. Who said, home. He took a sip. It was the sweetest, warmest thing he had ever tasted. And as the sweetness spread through him, a single, treacherous thought whispered in the back of his mind. What if it's taken away? Chapter 3, A Foundation of Stone and Silence. The Bones family home was not what Harry expected. He'd pictured something like the Dursleys, but bigger, grander, stuffed with more doilies and rules. The car had taken them not to another city street, but through another shimmering wall that opened onto a winding country lane in deep twilight. The house appeared at the end of a long drive, nestled against a dark fringe of forest. It wasn't a castle, but a sturdy, 3-story manor of gray stone, ivy climbing its walls like a living tapestry. Lights glowed warmly from diamond-paned windows. It looked solid, unshakable, old. Bones Manor, Amelia said as the car crunched to a halt on the gravel. It's been in the family for 7 centuries. Warded to the teeth. You are safe here, Harry. Truly. Safe. He tested the word again. It still didn't fit. Susan had fallen asleep in the office, her head pillowed on her book. Amelia had carried her, the girl a slight, trusting weight in her arms, through the ministry corridors and into the car. Harry had followed, feeling like a ghost haunting their lives. Now, Amelia led a sleepy Susan up the front steps, Harry trailing behind. The heavy oak door opened before they reached it, revealing a house elf. This one was small, with large, bat-like ears and eyes like luminous tennis balls. It wore a neat tea towel embroidered with the Bones crest, a badger skull and crossbones. Mistress Amelia. Young Miss Susan. The elf squeaked, bowing so low its nose touched the floor. Then its huge eyes lifted and fixed on Harry. They widened even further, if that were possible. This is Mipsy, Amelia said. Mipsy, this is Harry Potter. He will be living with us. He is family. The word landed in the quiet hallway, resonant as a bell. Mipsy's lower lip trembled. Young Master Harry Potter. Mipsy is honored. Mipsy will take excellent care. She bowed again, then scurried ahead, snapping her fingers. Lamps flared to life along the paneled walls, revealing a hallway lined with portraits. Unlike the static pictures of Privet Drive, these moved. Men and women in wizarding robes nodded gravely down at him. One old witch with Amelia's severe brow gave him a particularly sharp look. Your room is on the 2nd floor, next to Susan's, Amelia said, her voice echoing in the high space. Mipsy will show you. Bath first, I think. Then bed. We'll talk properly in the morning. It wasn't a suggestion. Harry nodded, mute. Mipsy took his hand. Her skin was dry and papery, but her grip was firm, and led him up a broad, wooden staircase. The house was quiet, but not empty quiet. It was a living quiet, full of the settling sounds of old stone and wood, the faint crackle of distant fires. It smelled of beeswax, old books, and dried herbs. His room was nothing like the cupboard. It was vast. A large 4-poster bed with heavy green hangings dominated the space. A desk sat under a window that looked out onto the dark grounds. A bookshelf waited, empty. A door led to a small, private bathroom with gleaming brass fittings. Does young master require anything? Mipsy asked, wringing the hem of her tea towel. Mipsy can draw a bath. Fetch supper. Harry shook his head. He couldn't imagine eating. No, thank you. Mipsy looked distressed. Mipsy will leave a tray, just in case. She popped away with a soft crack. Alone, the silence rushed in. He stood in the center of the room, the plush rug soft under his bare feet. He was filthy. He could still smell the dust of the cupboard on his clothes. He walked into the bathroom and stared at the large, clawfoot tub. He'd never had a bath all to himself. At the Dursleys, he was given 5 minutes in the morning before the water got cold, with Aunt Petunia shouting through the door about wasting time. He turned the taps. Hot water gushed out, steaming. He didn't know how to make it stop. It rose alarmingly fast. He fumbled with the other tap, mixing in cold, until it was a deep, perfect warmth. He peeled off his clothes, letting them fall in a heap on the floor, and climbed in. The heat was a shock. It seeped into muscles he didn't know were clenched, unwinding knots of tension held for years. He sank until the water covered his shoulders. The ring on his finger glinted under the surface. He tried to pull it off. It didn't budge. He scrubbed himself with a bar of lavender-scented soap until his skin was pink and raw. The grime of Privet Drive swirled down the drain. He washed his hair 3 times. When he finally climbed out, wrapped in a towel so thick and soft it felt like a cloud, he was clean. Truly clean, for the first time he could remember. Mipsy had been back. His old clothes were gone. On the bed lay a set of green silk pajamas. They were too big, but they were clean and smelled of sunshine. He put them on. A tray sat on the desk, a bowl of soup, a crusty roll, a glass of milk. His stomach growled, a traitorous sound. He ate the soup, dipping the roll into it. It was rich and savory. He drank the milk. It was cold and sweet. He climbed into the bed. The mattress was deep and yielding, the blankets heavy. He sank into it, the sheer comfort of it almost painful. He stared up at the dark green canopy. This was a trick. It had to be. A beautiful, soft, warm trick. In the morning, they would realize their mistake. They would see the freak behind the scar and send him back. Or this would vanish, and he'd wake up in the cupboard, the smell of bacon seeping through the door. He closed his eyes, the memory of Susan's smile, of Amelia's steady hand, of the taste of cocoa, floating behind his eyelids. A fragile, desperate hope bloomed in his chest, so delicate he was afraid to breathe on it. He fell into a sleep so deep it was like drowning. He woke to sunlight streaming through the window, painting bright squares on the rug. For a panicked second, he didn't know where he was. The space, the softness, the silence, it was all wrong. Then he saw the ring on his finger, the green hangings. A soft knock at the door. "Harry." It was Amelia's voice. "May I come in?" He sat up, pulling the blankets to his chin. "Yes." She entered, dressed in neat, practical robes of charcoal gray. She carried a bundle of clothes. "I hope you slept. These should fit better." She laid them on the foot of the bed. Trousers, a shirt, a jumper, all in dark, simple colors. "Come down to the breakfast room when you're ready. Susan is eager to see you." She left as quietly as she'd come. The clothes fit. They were his. The idea was staggering. He made the bed, smoothing the covers with nervous precision, a habit born of necessity at Privet Drive. He found the breakfast room by following the smell of toast and the sound of voices. It was a sunny room with a round table. Susan was there, spreading jam on a scone. She beamed when she saw him. "Good morning. Did you sleep okay? I sometimes think the portraits snore." Amelia was reading a newspaper, the Daily Prophet. The headline screamed, "Boy WHO lived rescued. Dursleys charged with magical neglect." A moving photograph showed a younger version of himself, blinking in confusion. He looked away, his cheeks heating. "Sit, Harry," Amelia said, folding the paper and setting it aside. "Eat what you like." The table held a feast. Eggs, bacon, sausages, toast, porridge, fruit. He took a little of everything, his plate soon full. He ate slowly, savoring each bite, waiting for the catch. There was no catch. Just quiet eating, the clink of cutlery, Susan chattering about a book on flobberworms. When they were finished, Amelia pushed her chair back. "Harry, we need to discuss your situation. Come to my study." The study was lined with books from floor to ceiling. A massive, scarred oak desk dominated the room. Trophies and artifacts sat on shelves, a gleaming silver badge that said Auror, a damaged helmet, a crystal that swirled with dark smoke. This was the heart of her power. She sat behind the desk, gesturing for him to take the chair opposite. He sat, feeling very small. "First," she began, her hands folded on the desk. "Your health. A healer from St. Mungos will come this afternoon to give you a full checkup. Magical and physical. I suspect you are behind in several areas. Harry stared at his knees. Second, your education. You will begin magical tutoring immediately. Basic theory, history, magical culture. You have 8 years of catching up to do. Susan will join you for some lessons. When you are 11, you will attend Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, as your parents did. Hogwarts. The word stirred something, a faint, warm echo. Third, your safety. You are a symbol, Harry. To many, you are a hero who defeated the Dark Lord Voldemort. He flinched at the name, she did not. To others, you are a reminder of a defeat they wish to avenge. You will not leave the grounds without myself or a trusted Auror. The wards here are powerful, but not infallible. Vigilance is not paranoia, it is survival. Do you understand? He nodded. Good. Now, the Dursleys. Her voice turned flinty. They have been charged. They will face the Wizengamot. You will not have to see them again. That chapter is closed. Closed. The word was final. A door slammed shut. Finally, she said, and she leaned forward slightly. This is your home now. Susan is family. I am your guardian. That means I will feed you, clothe you, protect you, and educate you. It also means I will discipline you if needed. I expect honesty. I expect effort. I expect you to learn the rules of this house and this world. In return, you will have a place here. For as long as you need it. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't offering hugs or empty comfort. She was laying out a contract, clear and stark as the stone of her house. It was terrifying in its honesty. There were rules. There were expectations. But there was also a place. Do you have any questions? She asked. He had 1,000. They jumbled in his throat. One rose to the surface, the most urgent. My parents, he whispered. Can you tell me about them? Amelia's stern expression softened, just a fraction. She opened a drawer and pulled out a photograph. She handed it across the desk. It was a moving picture. A man with messy black hair and glasses, laughing, waving. A woman with vibrant red hair and kind, green eyes, his eyes, leaning her head on his shoulder. They were moving, alive, happy. James Potter. Brilliant, arrogant, fiercely loyal. Lily Evans. One of the brightest witches of her age, with a heart so strong it became a shield. Amelia's voice was low. They loved you, Harry. More than anything. They died to protect you. Never forget that. They are not just a story. They are your blood. Tears blurred the photograph. He didn't try to stop them. They were hot and silent, dripping onto the polished wood of the desk. He traced a finger over the moving image of his mother's smile. He had a face. He had a story. He had a ring on his finger and a mountain of gold in a vault. He had a solid stone house and a severe, honest woman who promised to keep him safe. He had a home. And as he wept silently for the parents he would never know, for the life he had lost, for the terrifying new world he had gained, he felt something shift inside him. Not a surge of power. Not a flash of light. But the first, fragile stone of a foundation, settling into place. Chapter 4, The Healer's Truth. The healer arrived after lunch. She was a brisk, no-nonsense witch named Pomfrey, a different one, Amelia explained, not the Hogwarts matron, but a cousin, with a kind face and sharp eyes behind square spectacles. Her robes were clean and starched. Right then, Mr. Potter, she said, ushering him into a spare room Mipsy had prepared as a temporary examination room. A high bed, a cabinet of potions, a strange silver instrument that whirred softly on a stand. Madame Bones has given me the basics. Let's have a proper look at you. Up on the bed, please. Amelia stood by the door, a silent, watchful presence. Harry climbed onto the cold leather of the bed, his heart beginning to drum a nervous rhythm. Healer Pomfrey started with her wand, waving it in slow, complex patterns over his body. It emitted soft, colored lights, pink, gold, blue, that sank into his skin. She hummed and tutted, making notes on a floating parchment. General malnutrition, she said, her voice clinical. Stunted growth for his age. Several old, poorly set fractures, ribs, fingers. Her eyes flicked to Amelia. Consistent with repeated physical trauma. Harry kept his gaze fixed on the ceiling. He could feel their eyes on him, could feel the shame heating his skin. He was a catalogue of neglect, written on his bones. Eyesight is poor, correctable with potions, but glasses will be faster for now. Dental health is adequate, surprisingly. Now, let's look at the magical core. She took out a different instrument, a clear crystal prism. Place your hand here, Harry. And try to relax. He laid his palm on the cool crystal. Nothing happened. Think about magic, Pomfrey guided. Think about the feeling when something odd happened. The glass at the zoo, perhaps. He remembered the hot, panicked wish for the glass to disappear. The prism in his hand grew warm. Then it blazed with a light so fierce and white he had to squint. Threads of color shot through it, streaks of gold, deep green, a shocking bolt of crimson. Healer Pomfrey gasped. The floating quill scribbled frantically. Merlin's beard, she breathed. The core development, it's volatile. Immense potential, completely untrained. It's been reacting to stress, to strong emotion, like a muscle spasming. The healing magic he performed, it was a reflexive discharge. Extraordinary. She looked at Amelia, her professional calm cracked with awe. He has raw power on a scale I've rarely seen, Madam Bones. But it's wild, untamed. Without training, it could become unstable. Or worse, it could attract attention from instruments that measure such things. Amelia's face was grave. Understood. We begin training immediately. What else? Pomfrey moved to the last thing. She gently pushed his fringe aside. The scar. The moment her wand tip came near it, the prism in Harry's other hand, which had been fading, flared again, a sickly, dark green. A low, cold pain lanced through Harry's skull, sharp enough to make him flinch. "Don't touch it," he said, the words ripped from him. Pomfrey pulled back, her eyes wide. The silver instrument on the stand began to spin wildly, emitting a high, frantic whine. "Dark magic residue," she whispered. "Profoundly dark. It's not just a scar, it's a locus. A connection. A connection to what?" Amelia's voice was steel. "To the curse that killed his mother. To the one who cast it. I cannot say more without deeper, more invasive scans. But it is active. It is living." The room went very cold. Harry's stomach clenched. The scar wasn't just a mark. It was a piece of that terrible night, stuck in his skin. A wire leading back to the monster who had orphaned him. "Can it be removed?" Amelia asked. "I would not dare try," Pomfrey said, shaking her head. "Not without consulting experts in cursed scars. The risk of triggering something, of harming the boy, it's too great. For now, we monitor it. He may experience pain, visions even, when it is active." Visions. Of what? Of him. The examination concluded. Pomfrey prescribed a regime of nutrient potions, a strengthening draft, and gave him a temporary pair of round spectacles. "These will do until we get proper ones made. Try them on." He put them on. The world snapped into a clarity so sharp it was dizzying. He could see the individual threads in Healer Pomfrey's robes, the dust motes dancing in a sunbeam, the faint worry lines around Amelia's eyes. It was overwhelming. After Pomfrey left, with promises to return in a week, Amelia knelt before Harry. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, the new glasses feeling strange on his nose, the diagnosis ringing in his ears. "Volatile. Untamed. A connection. Listen to me, Harry," she said, her monocle catching the light. "What she said about your power, it is a tool. Like a very sharp sword. In the wrong hands, or with no training, it is dangerous. In the right hands, with discipline, it is a weapon for good. We will train. We will discipline it. You are not a threat. You are a student." She pointed a finger at his forehead. "And this changes nothing. It is a wound. A badge of survival. We will learn about it, we will guard against it, but we will not fear it. Do you understand?" He wanted to believe her. He nodded. "Good. Now, your first lesson begins in 1 hour. In the library. Do not be late. The library was a cavernous, 2-story room that smelled of leather and parchment. Susan was already there, her books neatly arranged. Their tutor was a retired wizard named Professor Figworth, a thin man with a perpetually surprised expression and a kind, if absent-minded, demeanor. "Ah, the young Mr. Potter," he said, peering at Harry over his half-moon glasses. "And Miss Bones. Welcome to the fundamentals of magical theory. We shall start at the beginning. What is magic?" Harry sat, his mind still reeling from the healer's visit. Magic was a wild thing inside him. Magic was a curse on his forehead. Magic was gold in a vault and a brick wall opening. Magic, Figworth continued, is the manifestation of will upon the world. It is life, given intent. All living things have it, in some measure. Witches and wizards simply have the faucet, if you will, turned to a much greater flow. He had them practice the most basic of basics, focus. Holding a feather and, through concentration alone, making it tremble. Susan's feather twitched almost immediately, rising an inch before floating gently down. Harry stared at his brow furrowed. He willed it to move. Nothing. He thought of the zoo glass, of his skin healing. The memory brought a flash of heat, of panic. His feather didn't tremble. It exploded into flames. A small, silent whoosh, and it was a blackened curl of ash on the table. Figworth blinked. Oh, well, that is, direct. A strong emotional conduit. We shall work on control, Mr. Potter. Finesse, not force. The lessons continued. History. The founding of the ministry. The Goblin Wars. The names and dates swam in Harry's head. It was so much. Susan knew a lot of it already, answering questions with quiet confidence. Harry felt stupid, slow. After 2 hours, Figworth dismissed them. Susan gathered her things. You'll get it, she said softly. Aunt Amelia says everyone learns at their own pace. Do you want to see the greenhouses? There's a venomous tentacula that's about to flower. It's brilliant. He followed her, grateful for the reprieve from the books. The grounds were large, with walled gardens, a small lake, and several glasshouses. Susan led him to one, inside which the air was hot and damp. In the center, a large, potted plant with thick, swaying vines and a large, pulsating bud sat. It only flowers every 3 years, Susan whispered. It'll shoot spores everywhere. We have to stand back. They watched the bud, which slowly began to peel open, revealing iridescent, fleshy petals. A strange, sweet smell filled the air. Harry forgot about the scar, about his wild magic, about feeling stupid. He was just a boy, watching a dangerous, beautiful thing happen. The flower bloomed with a final, graceful unfurling. Then, with a sound like a sigh, it released a cloud of shimmering gold spores that filled the greenhouse like fairy dust. Wow, Harry breathed. Susan grinned. Told you. Later, at dinner, Amelia asked about the lessons. Susan talked animatedly about the tentacula. Harry just said, it was hard. It will be, Amelia agreed. But you will master it. Bones do not quit. That night, in his too soft bed, he replayed the day. The healer's words. The burning feather. Susan's patient smile. The glowing spores. His scar gave a sudden, vicious throb. A flash of searing green light, blinding, filled his mind. A high, cold laugh echoed, so faint it might have been the wind in the eaves. He sat bolt upright, gasping, his heart slamming against his ribs. The room was dark and silent. The portraits on the walls were still. But the echo of that laugh lingered, a stain on the quiet. It was not just a scar. And the world outside these stone walls was not just gold and floating spores. It was dark, and it was listening. He lay back down, pulling the blankets up to his chin, staring into the darkness until the sun began to bleed gray light around the edges of the curtains. Chapter 5, The Weight of a Name. The days began to find a rhythm, as steady and unyielding as the stones of Bones Manor. Dawn brought nutrient potions that tasted of iron and earth, followed by breakfast with Susan's quiet chatter and Amelia reading reports over toast. Then, lessons. Professor Figworth was a patient, if easily distracted, guide. They moved from theory to practical exercises of the mildest sort. Levitation charms, Wingardium Leviosa, were the focus. Susan mastered the pronunciation and wand movement within a week, sending her feather dancing around the library with precise control. Harry's feather either lay inert as a rock or, if his frustration spiked, met a fiery end. The power is there, Mr. Potter, Figworth would say, mopping his brow after extinguishing another small flame. The connection is, alarmingly direct. We must build a dam, not break down a wall. The dam felt impossible. His magic was a storm inside him, and they were asking him to channel it through a pinhole. He'd spent his life suppressing anything odd, locking it away deep down. Now they wanted him to open that lock, but only a specific, tiny crack. It was maddening. The afternoons were for other subjects. Magical history was a litany of wars, betrayals, and laws. Magical biology was bizarre and fascinating. They learned about diracals that could vanish and reappear, and why you should never tickle a sleeping Grindylow. Through it all, Susan was a constant, gentle presence. She never made him feel stupid for not knowing what an easel was, or who invented the self-stirring cauldron. She simply explained, or fetched a book, or shared a sweets from her pocket. It was during a lesson on famous wizarding families that Harry's world tilted again. Figworth was droning on about the sacred 28 pure-blood lineages. The Bones family is among them, of course. Ancient, respected. Not as flashy as the Malfoys, but with a reputation for integrity and magical prowess in defense and law. He pointed his chalk at Harry. And you, Mr. Potter, are the last of a most noble line. The Potters, while not on that particular list, they had a noted fondness for Muggle-borns, you see, or a family of immense prestige. Your grandfather, Fleemont Potter, invented the Sleekeazy's hair potion, quadrupling the family fortune. Your family has always been known for two things: extraordinary talent in transfiguration, and a certain, rebellious courage. Harry stared at the family tree Figworth had drawn on the blackboard. Seeing his name at the end of a long, branching line made him feel hollow. He was supposed to be the next part of that line. What if he couldn't do it? What if his magic stayed wild and useless, or burnt everything down? And then, of course, Figworth said, his voice dropping slightly, there is the other name you bear. Not Potter, but the boy who lived. The title dropped into the quiet library like a stone. It is not just a story, children. It is a historical event. On Samhain, 1981, the Dark Lord Voldemort, Susan flinched, Harry's scar gave a phantom twinge, came to Godric's Hollow to kill the infant Harry Potter. He murdered James and Lily Potter, but when he turned his wand on Harry, the killing curse rebounded. It destroyed Voldemort's body and left Harry with his scar. Thus, Harry Potter became a symbol of hope for the wizarding world, and the one who wrought the Dark Lord's downfall. He said it like reading from a textbook. A fact. But Harry felt sick. Hope. He was a baby in a crib. He didn't do anything. He was just there. The wrong person in the wrong place, who somehow didn't die. So people think I defeated him? Harry asked, his voice small. They know you survived, Figworth corrected gently. And in a war where survival was a rare victory, that was enough. You are famous, Harry. When you eventually enter our world properly, people will stare. They will want things from you. Your name carries a weight. You must decide what you will add to it. The weight settled on his shoulders, heavier than before. He wasn't just catching up on schoolwork. He was preparing to carry a legend he didn't make. That evening, after a silent dinner where he pushed his food around his plate, Amelia called him to her study. Figworth told me about the lesson, she said without preamble. She was standing at the window, looking out at the darkening grounds. The burden of fame is something I cannot shield you from forever. But I can teach you how to stand under it. She turned to face him. The world will see the scar, the story. They will have expectations. The trick, Harry, is to know yourself so firmly that their expectations become irrelevant. You are not a symbol. You are a boy, a wizard in training. Your worth is not in a scar, but in your character. In your choices. What if my choices are wrong? The question burst out of him. What if I can't control my magic? What if I'm not brave, like they were? Courage isn't the absence of fear, Amelia said, walking to her desk. She opened a drawer and pulled out a small, framed photograph. It showed a younger Amelia, her hair less gray, standing with a smiling man and woman who had Susan's kind eyes. It is acting. In spite of it, my brother, Edgar, and his wife, Susan's parents, they were Aurors. They were brave. And they were killed, defending their home from Death Eaters, Voldemort's followers, because they refused to renounce their work. They made a choice. A hard one. She put the photo down, her finger resting on the glass over her brother's face. I made a choice to take you in. It was not the easy choice. It brings danger to my door. It complicates my life. But it was the right choice. You will make wrong choices, Harry. Everyone does. What defines you is what you do after. You learn. You make amends. You try again. She looked at him, her gaze piercing. Now, your magic. We are approaching it wrong. Figworth is a theorist. You are not a theory. You are a reflex. A survivor. Your magic has been a shield, a weapon of last resort. We will train it as such. She led him down to a room he hadn't seen before, in the cellar. It was a training room. The walls were bare stone, scarred with old spell marks. The floor was padded. Targets stood at one end. No feather tonight, Amelia said, drawing her wand. Tonight, we work on instinct. I am going to throw a very soft, very slow stinging hex at you. Your job is not to recite an incantation. Your job is to not get hit. How? However you can. Dodge, block, or, if you can, stop it. You have the power. You just need to stop thinking and act. Before he could protest, she flicked her wand. Stupefy. A jet of red light, slow and wide, lanced toward him. Panic. Pure, animal panic. He threw himself sideways, hitting the padded floor hard. The spell smacked into the wall behind him. Good. Dodge is a valid defense. Again, she sent another. He rolled. Another. He scrambled behind a training dummy. The fourth one came faster. He was cornered. The red light sped toward his chest. He couldn't dodge. No. The thought was pure, vehement rejection. His hand, of its own accord, shot up. Not with a wand. Just his palm, facing the spell. The red light hit an invisible wall an inch from his skin and shattered into harmless sparks. Silence. Harry stared at his hand, trembling. He hadn't said a word. He hadn't thought of a spell. He'd just refused. Amelia lowered her wand, a look of stark astonishment on her face. It was the first time he'd seen her truly surprised. Protega, she whispered. A perfect, non-verbal, wandless shield charm. A 6th-year level spell. I didn't. I know, she said, her voice tight with something like awe, or worry. You felt threatened, and your magic reacted. Instinctively. Defensively. She walked closer, her eyes analyzing him like a complex puzzle. This is your foundation, Harry. Not careful levitation. Not theory. Defense. Your magic is a guardian. We will build on that. She had him try to replicate it. For an hour, she threw slow hexes. Sometimes he could dodge. Sometimes he couldn't, and the stingers would hit, leaving warm, prickling patches on his skin. Only twice more, when he was too tired to think, just pure reaction, did the silent shield flare to life. Exhausted, sweaty, and covered in mild stings, he finally stumbled up to his room. But for the first time, he didn't feel like a failure. He'd done something, not with finesse, but with raw, desperate will. His magic wasn't just a wildfire. It was a wall. His wall. He fell asleep almost the moment his head hit the pillow. And he dreamed. But it wasn't a dream of green light or cold laughter. He was in the training room. But instead of Amelia, a man with messy black hair and glasses stood there, grinning. Nice shield, Prongslet. The man said, his voice warm and teasing. Now let's see you throw one back. And a woman with red hair and his eyes laughed from the sidelines. Don't encourage him, James. He's already got your flair for the dramatic. The dream was warm, and bright, and it felt like home. He woke with tears on his cheeks, but a strange, solid feeling in his chest. The names, Potter, the boy who lived, they were heavy. But maybe, just maybe, he could learn to carry them. Not as a symbol, but as a son. Chapter 6, Sparks and Shadows. The shield became their focus. Amelia, it turned out, was a relentless taskmistress when it came to practical defense. Figworth continued the theoretical and historical education, but for 2 hours each afternoon, the cellar training room became Harry's real classroom. They started with the basics of dueling stance, footwork, how to fall. Magic is not just in the wand, Amelia barked, as he tripped over his own feet for the 10th time. It is in your balance. In your breath. A wizard flat on his back is a dead wizard. He learned to pivot, to keep his weight centered, to never let his eyes leave his opponent, which was always her, a relentless, unmoving monolith of focus. She drilled him on recognizing hexes by their color and sound. A stunner is red and hums. A disarmer is scarlet and cracks. Know what's coming before it hits you. The silent, wandless shield remained elusive. It only happened under true duress, when he had no time to think. Amelia tried to trigger it by increasing the speed and variety of her attacks, but that mostly resulted in Harry becoming a pincushion for minor stinging and tickling hexes. He was constantly covered in pink, prickly welts and found himself giggling uncontrollably at inopportune moments. Susan would patch him up after, her small, capable hands dabbing Dittany on the stings. You're getting better, she'd say encouragingly. Yesterday you blocked 2 with a physical shield charm using a wand. That's progress. It was. Amelia had given him a practice wand, a simple, unyielding bit of holly that wasn't bonded to him but could channel magic. With it, he could now, after much straining and shouted incantations, produce a wobbly, translucent protega about the size of a dinner plate. It drained him, but it worked. The real breakthrough came on a rainy Tuesday. They were working on deflection, using a shield to angle a spell away, not just stop it. Amelia sent a particularly sharp stinger. Harry, tired and frustrated, brought up his practice wand and yelled, "Protega." The shield sprang to life, stronger than before, but his aim was off. The stinger hit the edge of the magical disc and ricocheted, not toward the wall, but straight back at Amelia. Time seemed to slow. He saw her eyes widen, not in fear, but in calculation. Her own wand moved in a blur, a silent flick, and the rebounding spell vaporized inches from her face. Silence, broken only by the patter of rain on the high cellar windows. Harry was panting, horrified. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." "Stop," Amelia said, her voice calm. She was looking at him not with anger, but with a fierce, proud intensity. "You deflected it. Unintentionally, but you did. The angle was poor, the control non-existent, but the principle was there. Your magic is learning. It is adapting." She walked over to him. "The shield is your foundation. But a wall that only stands still is eventually breached. We must make it move. We must make it yours." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "That is enough for today. You've earned a rest." But Harry didn't want to rest. The accidental deflection, the flash of surprise in her eyes, had lit a spark in him. A spark of possibility. He wasn't just a receptacle for wild power. He could direct it. He could, maybe, learn to control it. He spent the evening in the library, not on his set texts, but pulling down advanced books on defensive theory. The words were complex, the diagrams dizzying, but he struggled through them, Figworth's patient explanations from earlier lessons providing shaky scaffolding. Susan found him there, surrounded by a fortress of books. Looking for a shortcut to beating Aunt Amelia? She asked, a smile in her voice. Trying to understand, he mumbled, tracing a diagram of spell vectors with his finger. "It's like, the magic wants to protect. But I have to tell it how." Susan sat beside him, pulling a book toward her. It was on arithmancy and shield modulation. "This is fourth-year stuff, Harry. I know. But she says my magic is reacting like a sixth year's sometimes. Maybe I can understand it if I know what it's trying to do." Susan studied him for a long moment. "You're different, you know. Since you came. Not in a bad way. You're determined. Aunt Amelia sees it too. She talks about you to my portrait parents sometimes. She says you have a core of stubborn light." Harry blinked, a warm flush creeping up his neck. "She talks to portraits of your parents. In her study. There's a special one. They can't hold long conversations, but they know what's happening. They're proud of her. And, I think they'd be proud of you too." The warmth spread to his chest. It was a strange, aching feeling. To be seen. To be considered, even by portraits of dead people he'd never met. He returned to the books with renewed focus. Later, as he prepared for bed, he stood before the mirror in his bathroom. The glasses. The messy hair. The scar. He looked at the ring on his finger. Potter. He didn't feel like a symbol. He felt like a boy who was tired, covered in fading stings, and whose brain was full of spell diagrams. But for the first time, he also felt like maybe, just maybe, he could become a wizard. He practiced the shield charm with his practice wand, not shouting, but whispering the incantation. The shield flickered, weaker, but it held. He tried to imagine it not as a static plate, but as a curve, a dome. The magic strained, resisted, then with a soft shimmer, the edges of the shield bent inward slightly, forming a shallow bowl. It was a minuscule change. It exhausted him, but he had done it. He had shaped it. He fell into bed, his mind buzzing with vectors and incantations. His sleep was deep and dreamless. The next morning, the post brought an unexpected shock. As they ate breakfast, a large, tawny owl soared through the window and dropped a heavy parchment envelope in front of Amelia. It was sealed with a crest, a lion, eagle, badger, and snake surrounding a letter, H. Amelia opened it, her eyes scanning the contents. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "What is it, Aunt Amelia?" Susan asked. "Official correspondence from Hogwarts. From Professor Dumbledore." She set the letter down. "He has been made aware, through the ministry census, of Harry's change of guardianship and location. He requests a meeting to discuss Harry's future welfare and the continuance of certain necessary protections. A cold trickle of fear dripped down Harry's spine. Dumbledore, the headmaster, the greatest wizard in the world, everyone said. The man who had left him on the Dursleys' doorstep. What protections? Harry asked, his voice tight. The blood wards, Amelia said, her tone neutral, though her knuckles were white where she gripped her teacup. A powerful form of ancient magic. By placing you with your mother's blood relative, Petunia, Dumbledore enacted a charm that tied your mother's sacrificial protection to that house. As long as you could call it home, you were safe from Voldemort and his followers there. Home. The cupboard. The safety had been a cage, but according to Dumbledore, it had also been a shield. And now, Susan whispered, now, I have removed him. The wards are broken. Dumbledore believes this leaves Harry vulnerable. He wishes to assess the situation and, I suspect, propose alternatives. Amelia's monocle gleamed. He is a brilliant wizard. But he is not the law. And you are my ward. Will I have to go back? The question was out before Harry could stop it, raw with terror. Amelia looked at him, and her gaze was like granite. No, you will not. That is not an option. The meeting will be here. On my ground. You will be present, but you will let me do the talking. Do you understand? He nodded, the fear receding slightly under the force of her certainty. A week later, Albus Dumbledore arrived. He did not come by flow or apparition. He walked up the gravel drive, his long silver beard and purple robes shining in the afternoon sun. He looked like a figure from a storybook, kind and powerful. But Harry, watching from an upstairs window with Susan, felt only a deep, instinctive wariness. Amelia met him at the front door. Harry and Susan were instructed to wait in the drawing room. They sat in silence, listening to the low murmur of voices from Amelia's study. Susan reached over and took Harry's hand. Her palm was cool and steady. After an hour, they were called in. Dumbledore stood by the fireplace, his eyes twinkling behind half-moon spectacles. He looked at Harry, and his expression was one of profound kindness, and a sadness so deep it seemed to fill the room. Hello, Harry, he said, his voice gentle. You look very well. The glasses suit you. Thank you, sir, Harry mumbled, staring at the man's bizarre, star-spangled robes. Amelia has told me of your progress. Remarkable, given the circumstances. The wandless shield is a rare gift. So she'd told him. Harry glanced at Amelia, who gave a slight, confirming nod. The purpose of my visit, Dumbledore continued, his tone growing more grave, is twofold. First, to see you for myself. To ensure you are, indeed, in good hands. And second, to discuss the rather significant problem of your safety. He turned to Amelia. The blood wards were a powerful piece of magic, Amelia. With them broken, Harry's location is no longer hidden by his mother's sacrifice. The dark mark may be gone from the sky, but the hearts that bore it still beat. Some will seek him, for revenge, or for darker purposes. I am aware of the threats, Amelia said, her voice crisp. The Bones wards are formidable. He has constant guard. His training has begun, and I commend you for it, Dumbledore said, inclining his head. But there is another protection, one tied not to a place, but to a person. A secret. I believe it is time Harry learned of it. He looked back at Harry, his blue eyes piercing. On the night your parents died, a prophecy was made. It spoke of a child born at the end of July, who would have the power to vanquish the Dark Lord. It stated that the Dark Lord would mark him as his equal. Dumbledore's gaze rested on Harry's scar. Voldemort believed that child was you, Harry. And in attacking you, he fulfilled the second part of the prophecy. He marked you. The connection healer Pomfrey detected, it is a two-way street. As you are tied to him, so too is he tied to you. This is why you must be protected. Not just from his followers, but from the connection itself. It can be a window, and a door. The room spun. A prophecy. He was destined to fight that thing. The cold laugh in his dreams, the green light, that was his destiny. No, Harry said, the word tearing out of him. I didn't ask for that. I don't want it. I know, my boy, Dumbledore said, his voice heavy with sympathy. Which is why we must guard you all the more fiercely. The wards at Privet Drive were one layer. I propose another. A Fidelius charm. With myself as secret keeper. Your location would be hidden from all, even from those who stand in this very room, unless I chose to tell them. Amelia stood up, her chair scraping loudly. Absolutely not. You would make him a prisoner in a new way, Albus. Hidden from the world, dependent on you alone for any contact. He is not a weapon to be stored in a vault. He is a child who needs to learn, to grow, to have a life. A life he cannot have if he is dead. Dumbledore's voice, for the first time, held a note of thunder. The air crackled with his power. You are thinking as a guardian, Amelia. I must think as a general. The war may be over, but the battle for this boy's soul, for his very life, is not. And you think hiding him will win that battle? Amelia shot back, unwavering before his display of power. You think ignorance is protection. I am teaching him to defend himself. To understand what he is. Your way left him in a cupboard for 10 years. I will not make the same mistake. The two most powerful adults Harry knew were locked in a silent, furious standoff, magic thickening the air until it was hard to breathe. Dumbledore looked at Harry, his eyes full of that unbearable sadness. The path I offer is hard. Isolated. But it is safe. Harry looked from Dumbledore's kind, sorrowful face to Amelia's stern, defiant one. The woman who drilled him until he dropped, who spoke of choices and character, who had given him a room, a ring, a name. He didn't want to be a secret. He didn't want to be a prophecy. He wanted to be Harry. The boy who was learning to cast a shield. He found his voice. It was quiet, but it didn't shake. I'm staying here. Dumbledore closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them, the twinkle was gone, replaced by a weary resignation. Then you must be prepared, Harry. More prepared than any child should ever have to be. The connection you bear, it is a danger to you, and to those around you. You must learn occlumency, the art of shielding your mind. Amelia, you are capable, but I would offer my own instruction. I will arrange for an occlumency tutor, Amelia said firmly. A trusted one. The connection will be managed. The threats will be guarded against. But he stays. He lives. He does not just hide. Dumbledore sighed, a sound like wind through ancient trees. Very well. The weight of this choice is now on your shoulders, Amelia. And on yours, Harry. Remember, the connection works both ways. Guard your mind, your heart, your anger. They are doors he can use. He turned to leave, then paused at the study door. The offer of the Fidelius will remain open. Should you ever change your mind, the world is darker than you know, Harry. And it has its eye on you. He left, the front door closing with a soft, final click. The drawing room felt suddenly hollow. Harry sank into a chair, trembling. A prophecy. A destined fight. A connection to a monster. Amelia placed a hand on his head, a rare, brief gesture of comfort. He is not wrong about the danger, she said quietly. But he is wrong about the solution. We do not hide from storms, Harry. We learn to stand in them. And we do not stand alone. She looked at Susan, who was pale but resolute. We are Bones. We stand together. And we protect our own. The fear was still there, a cold stone in his gut. But under Amelia's hand, with Susan by his side, the stone had something to rest on. A foundation. The path ahead was dark, and full of shadows. But he was not in a cupboard. He was in a fortress. And he was learning to build walls of his own. Chapter 7. The Mind's Fortress. The week after Dumbledore's visit was shrouded in a new kind of tension. It wasn't the sharp fear of hexes in the training room, or the dull ache of information overload in the library. It was a silent, waiting pressure, like the air before a thunderstorm that never breaks. The word prophecy hung in the house, unspoken but felt in every quiet moment. Amelia was more preoccupied than ever, spending long hours in the ministry. Dawlish and another Auror, a wiry witch named Savage with a hawk-like gaze, took up rotating posts at the gates and within the manor itself. The wards, Amelia explained over a hurried dinner, were being augmented to ministry-grade siege specifications. Harry didn't know what that meant, but the increased watchfulness of the portraits and the way Mipsy jumped at every sound told him enough. His lessons with Figworth continued, but even the elderly professor seemed distracted, his lectures on the uses of moonstone in potions peppered with worried glances out the window. The only normalcy was Susan. She moved through the heightened security with a pragmatic calm, as if living in a fortified castle was perfectly ordinary. She dragged Harry to the greenhouses to check on the now dormant tentacula, and tried, unsuccessfully, to teach him wizard's chess. Harry's pieces, distrusting his commands, frequently resigned or offered baffling, suicidal advice. The promised occlumency tutor arrived on a Thursday. Her name was Medea Selwyn, and she was nothing like Harry expected. He'd pictured another Amelia, stern, sharp, armored in authority. Medea was perhaps 40, with a cloud of dark, curly hair streaked with silver, and eyes the color of a twilight sky. She wore robes of deep indigo that seemed to drink the light, and she moved with a fluid, silent grace that made her seem part of the manor's shadows. She carried the faint, clean scent of cedar and snow. Madame Bones, she greeted Amelia in the drawing room, her voice a low, melodic alto. Her gaze swept over Harry, and he felt strangely transparent, as if she were reading the title of a book from its spine. "And this is the pupil. Harry, this is Medea Selwyn," Amelia said. "One of the finest occlumens in Britain, and a trusted consultant for the DMLE. She has agreed to instruct you." Medea offered a slight smile that didn't quite reach her watchful eyes. "Occlumency is not a popular subject, Mr. Potter. It is the art of mental discipline. Of organizing, fortifying, and defending the mind. It is not magic in the wand-waving sense. It is magic of the self. It is, I warn you, difficult, frustrating, and often painful." "Painful?" Harry asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "To have one's mind invaded, even in practice, is a violation. It feels like a violation. My job is to teach you how to prevent it. We begin now. In the library." The library felt different with Medea Selwyn in it. The familiar scent of leather and parchment was overlaid with her cedar and snow aura. She had him sit in a high-backed chair opposite her. "Close your eyes," she instructed. "Do not think of closing them. Simply, allow the lids to fall. Good. Now, I want you to picture a room. Any room. It will be the antechamber of your mind. Furnish it. Detail it. Make it real to you." Harry thought of his bedroom at the manor. The four-poster, the desk, the window. "No," Medea's voice cut through, gentle but firm. "Too anchored to the physical world. It must be a room of your own making. A space that exists only for you, in here." A cool finger tapped his forehead. He tried again, flailing. He thought of the Gryffindor common room from one of the Hogwarts books Figworth had shown him, a cozy, red and gold space with squashy armchairs. "Better. But it is borrowed. It is not yours." Her voice was a guide in the dark. "Think of safety. Think of a place where no one can find you unless you allow it." Safety. The concept was so foreign, so tied to the solid stone of the manor and Amelia's presence. But then he remembered the feeling, just for a second, in the greenhouses with Susan, watching the spores float. The simple, uncomplicated wonder of it. Without meaning to, an image formed. A small, round room at the top of a very tall tower. It had a domed glass ceiling showing a perfect, starry night sky that was neither day nor night, but a perpetual, peaceful twilight. The floor was polished black wood. There was nothing in it. No furniture, no doors, just smooth, curved walls. "I have a room," he said. "Describe it to me." He did. As he spoke, the image solidified in his mind's eye, becoming more vivid than the library around him. "Good," Medea said. "That is your foundation. That is where we will build. Now, I am going to enter your mind. I will be gentle. Your task is not to stop me, you cannot, yet, but to observe the path I take. To feel the shape of the intrusion. Do not fight. Observe." Before he could brace himself, he felt it. It was not a physical touch. It was a presence, cool and methodical, slipping into the edges of his thoughts like mist under a door. He felt a flutter of panic, a memory trying to surface, the burning feather in Figworth's lesson, the sting of a hex. "Observe," Medea's voice echoed, both inside and outside his head. He tried to pull back, to watch. He saw the mist nudge at the memory of the feather. The image flickered, threatening to engulf him. "Guide me," the mist voice said. "Guide the intrusion to your room. Do not let it wander. Let it." It was like trying to herd a cat made of smoke. He concentrated on the tower room, on the starry ceiling. He mentally reached for the cool presence and tried to pull it toward that space, away from the scattered, raw memories of his first lessons. For a second, it worked. The mist coalesced, drawn toward the tower. He felt Medea's approval, a faint, warm ripple in the coolness. Then, from a dark corner of his mind he didn't even know was there, a door burst open. Green light. A high, cold laugh. The echoing scream of a woman. Not Harry. Please. The tower room shattered. The cool mist of Medea's presence was violently expelled. Harry's eyes flew open. He was gasping, his scar blazing with white-hot agony. He clutched his forehead, a strangled cry escaping his lips. Medea Selwyn was leaning back in her chair, her face pale. A thin trickle of blood ran from her nose. She wiped it away with a steady hand, her expression unreadable. Amelia, who had been watching from the doorway, was at his side in an instant. Harry. The connection, Medea said, her melodic voice slightly unsteady. It is not passive. It is a bastion. A dark, reactive bastion within him. When I probed near a memory of accidental magic, a moment of strong emotion, it triggered a defense. Not his. The others. Harry rocked in the chair, the pain in his scar slowly receding to a throbbing ache. He felt violated in a new, deeper way. Something inside him had attacked his teacher. Something that wasn't him. Can you teach him? Amelia asked, her hand firm on Harry's shoulder. Medea studied Harry for a long, silent moment. It will be harder. And more dangerous. For both of us. His mind is not an empty house to be secured. It is a battlefield with entrenched fortifications held by the enemy. Occlumency will not just be about building walls. It will be about learning the layout of that battlefield, and slowly, carefully, reclaiming territory. She stood. We will continue. But in smaller increments. We will fortify the tower room first. Make it impregnable. Then, we will map the darkness. Only then can we begin to wall it off. She left the library, her robes whispering against the floor. Amelia handed Harry a glass of water. His hands shook so badly he spilled some on his trousers. She called it a bastion, he mumbled, the taste of fear coppery in his mouth. Then we will lay siege to it, Amelia said, her voice utterly matter of fact. Every day, brick by brick. You are not the darkness in your scar, Harry. You are the one learning to lock the door. The next session was shorter. Medea did not attempt to probe. Instead, she taught him breathing exercises, patterns of thought that were like mental locks and bolts. She called it, laying the mortar, for his tower room. He practiced for an hour each day, seated in silence, building the walls in his mind, polishing the floor, fixing the image of the starry dome so firmly that it felt more real than the library around him. It was exhausting, brain-aching work. But after a week, he could slip into the tower room at a moment's notice, the door in his mind sealing shut with a sense of profound quiet. It was a refuge, however small. During one of these practice sessions, as he sat in the window seat of the library, the world outside faded. His breathing slowed. The tower room was solid around him, silent and safe. A whisper slithered against the walls, thin as a blade of ice. Little seeker, hiding in a tower. His eyes flew open. He was back in the library, heart pounding. The whisper hadn't been in the room. It had been in the tower. In his sanctuary. He told Medea at their next lesson. Her serene face tightened. It is aware of your efforts, she said. It is testing the new fortifications. This is good. Good. Harry asked, incredulous. It means you are building something strong enough to be worth testing. Now, we add a new layer. Not just walls. A guardian. An image, a thought form, to patrol the borders of your mental space. It can be anything. A dog, a knight, a flame, something that represents protection to you. Harry thought immediately of the stag. The Patronus charm was far beyond him, he knew, but the image of his father's animagus form from a photograph Amelia had shown him was powerful, noble. A guardian of light. A stag, he said. Medea nodded. Visualize it. Not just its shape, but its purpose. Its vigilance. Place it at the door of your tower. He tried. For days, the stag was a faint, ghostly outline. But he kept at it, during his occlumency practice, in quiet moments before sleep. He gave it details, the powerful antlers, the warm breath fogging in the cool air of the tower, the intelligent, watchful eyes. A week later, during a session where Medea applied the gentlest pressure against his tower door, the stag appeared. Not clearly, but as a solid, warm presence standing between the mist of her probe and the entrance. It lowered its head, antlers gleaming with a soft, silver light that was entirely Harry's own. Medea withdrew, a genuine smile touching her lips for the first time. Excellent. A true mental construct. It will grow stronger with your practice. Now, your sanctuary has a sentinel. The success with the stag bled into other areas. In the training room, his physical shields became more reliable. He could now cast a consistent protego with his practice wand, and had even managed, once, to angle a hex away on purpose. His theoretical lessons were still a struggle, but Susan's patient tutoring was helping the information stick. He was building, brick by brick, spell by spell. The fragile normalcy was shattered by an owl. It wasn't a ministry owl, or a personal one. It was a small, scruffy brown thing that looked half-starved. It shot through an open window during dinner, dropping a single, cheap envelope onto Harry's plate, splattering his potatoes with ink, before collapsing, exhausted, on the table. Amelia seized the envelope before Harry could touch it. She ran her wand over it. No curses. Traced to a magical clearing house in Nocturne Alley. Untraceable further. She opened it. Inside was a single piece of lined parchment, the writing a spidery, agitated scrawl. They know you're with the Bones woman. They're watching. The snake dreams the boy's dreams. He is coming. A friend. Amelia's face turned to stone. She looked at the owl, then at Dawlish, who had sprung to his feet, his wand out. Savage. Double the perimeter checks. Full spectral sweep. Now. She turned to Harry, the note crumpled in her fist. The owl is a diversion. A crude one. The message is meant to frighten. To disrupt. Her eyes were like flint. It changes nothing about our plans. It only confirms their necessity. But it changed everything in the atmosphere of the house. The waiting pressure broke into a sharp, crystalline alertness. The Aurors spoke in hushed, urgent tones. Amelia was on the flow constantly, her voice a low, fierce murmur. Harry lay awake that night, the words burning behind his eyes. The snake dreams the boy's dreams. He thought of the cold presence in his mind, the whisper in his tower. Was that the snake? Was he dreaming for something else, somewhere? He slipped into his occlumency exercises without thinking, retreating to the tower. The stag was there, a comforting, solid shadow in the starlight. He reinforced the walls, layer upon layer, until they felt like mountain rock. He would not be a window. He would not be a door. He was building a fortress. And he would man the walls himself. The next morning, at breakfast, Amelia made an announcement. The annual ministry summer garden party is in 2 weeks. A tiresome affair, but necessary. A show of unity and normalcy. We will be attending. Susan's eyes went wide. All of us. All of us. In full view. Harry needs to be seen. Not as a hidden victim, but as the ward of the Director of Magical Law Enforcement, safe, protected, and being raised as a member of Wizarding Society. She looked at Harry. It will be your first public appearance. There will be stares. There will be whispers. There will be people who want to get close to you for 100 different reasons. You will stay by my side or Susan's at all times. You will be polite. You will be guarded. And you will remember your training. Harry's stomach clenched. The thought of a crowd, of all those eyes on his scar, was terrifying. But he saw the logic in it. Hiding would look like fear. Showing his face was a statement. What if someone tries something? He asked. Amelia's smile was thin and sharp. Then they will discover that the director of the DMLE does not attend parties without being prepared for war. And that her ward is learning to defend his own mind. We go, not as targets, but as a standard. A declaration. She rose from the table. Your occlumency practice is now twice daily. Your defensive drills will include crowd scenarios. We have 2 weeks to prepare. As she left, Susan reached over and squeezed Harry's hand under the table. Her fingers were cold. It'll be all right, she whispered. We'll be together. And Aunt Amelia's the scariest person there. Harry managed a weak smile. But his mind was already racing, not with fear of the crowd, but with the last line of the note. He is coming. The fortress in his mind felt strong. But the world outside was vast, and dark, and full of watching eyes. The garden party was no longer just a social event. It was their first line in the sand. And he would have to stand on it. Chapter 8. The Gilded Cage. Preparation for the garden party became a military campaign. Amelia's study was transformed into a war room, maps of the ministry grounds, donated by a tight-lipped Dawlish, spread across her desk, dotted with small, enchanted figurines representing security details. Harry and Susan were drilled not on spells, but on protocol. You will not wander. You will not accept food or drink from anyone but MIPC, who will be attending in a service capacity. You will keep your back to a wall whenever possible. If I say, Badger, you move immediately to Susan. If Susan says, Daffodil, you move immediately to me. No questions. You will be introduced as, Harry Potter, my ward. You will shake hands if offered, but keep it brief. You will not engage in political discussions. You will smile, but not broadly. You are pleased to be there, but not excited. You are safe, but not oblivious. It was another layer of occlumency, Harry realized. Not guarding his thoughts, but guarding his expressions, his reactions, his very presence in a crowd. He practiced a neutral, polite smile in the mirror until his face ached. His actual magical training intensified to match. Medea Selwyn came daily, pushing his mental fortifications. The tower room now had a hallway leading to it, with several empty, locked doors branching off, future rooms for different types of memories, she explained. The silver stag was a constant, watchful presence. The whispers against the walls had ceased, but the feeling of something pressing against the outer boundaries of his mind was a constant, low-grade hum. In the cellar, Amelia changed tactics. No more one-on-one dueling. She conjured faceless, black-robed dummy opponents that moved with jerky, unpredictable motions. Death Eaters did not duel by etiquette, she said grimly as Harry dodged a poorly aimed but stinging hex from a third dummy he hadn't seen. They ambushed. They used hostages. They fought dirty. You must see the whole field. He learned to fight moving backwards, to use the environment, a flipped training dummy as momentary cover, a well-aimed locomotor spell to trip up a pursuer. His shield charm became his most reliable tool. He could now cast it wordlessly about half the time with his practice wand, a shimmering half-dome that held against her weaker jinxes. The day before the party, Amelia presented them with their clothes. For Harry, it was formal wizarding robes of a deep, forest green, cut slim and elegant, with a high collar that subtly obscured the lower part of his scar. The Potter ring shone starkly against the dark fabric. Susan's robes were a complementary shade of bronze, embroidered with tiny badgers around the hem. You look like a proper wizard, Susan said, her eyes wide as she looked him up and down. Harry stared at his reflection. The boy in the mirror was still small, still thin, but the robes gave him a shape, a definition. The glasses no longer looked too big for his face. He didn't see the boy who lived. He saw a student of Bones Manor. It was a better face. Remember, Amelia said, appearing behind them, her own robe severe black, her monocle a disk of cold fire. This is a display of strength. You are not bait. You are a statement. Now, both of you, early nights. Tomorrow requires endurance of a different kind. Sleep was impossible. Harry lay in the dark, running scenarios. 100 faces, staring. A handshake that lingered too long. A smile that didn't reach the eyes. He practiced his occlumency breathing, retreating to the tower. The stag stood silent guard. For the first time, Harry reached out a mental hand and touched its side. It felt like cool, solid moonlight. A sense of calm, borrowed from his own deepest self, flowed back into him. The ministry atrium, seen through the public visitors' entrance, was a shock of gleaming black marble and rushing witches and wizards. The giant fountain of magical brethren sent shimmering rainbows across the domed ceiling. But they didn't linger. Amelia swept them through a side door, down a corridor, and into a private elevator that opened directly onto the sprawling gardens at the back of the ministry. The noise hit Harry first. A wall of chatter, laughter, and the tinkle of glass. The scent of cut grass, perfume, and magical fireworks. The garden was a curated paradise, geometric hedges, floating lanterns, peacocks with tails of real jewels strutting on the lawns. A long, white-draped table groaned with delicacies. And everywhere, people. Robes of every hue, hats of absurd proportions, the glint of jewels and metals. As they stepped out of the elevator bank, a hush fell. It didn't happen all at once. It rolled out from their point of entry like a ripple on a pond. Conversations stuttered and died. Heads turned. Glasses paused halfway to lips. Every single eye was fixed on Harry. He felt the weight of it, a physical pressure against his chest. His occlumency walls shuddered. He could feel the collective gaze like 1,000 tiny probes against his mind. He focused on the feel of Susan's arm brushing his, on the solid, unyielding presence of Amelia one step ahead. Chin up, Amelia murmured, not looking back. Walk. They moved into the crowd. The silence broke into a frenetic buzz of whispers. He caught fragments as they passed. Bones has him, just as they said. Looks healthy, doesn't he? Ellipsis quote. See the ring, he's been to Gringotts. Poor dear, that scar. Amelia didn't stop. She acknowledged nods with a curt tilt of her head, but her course was set for a raised dais where Minister for Magic Cornelius Fudge, resplendent in pinstriped robes and a lime-green bowler, was holding court. Amelia, so good of you to come. Fudge boomed, his voice overly hearty. His small eyes darted to Harry and widened with avid curiosity. And you've brought the young guest of honor. Harry Potter, my boy. What an absolute pleasure. Fudge thrust out a hand. Harry shook it, as drilled. The minister's palm was damp. Thank you for having me, Minister, Harry said, the words feeling wooden. Thriving under your care, Amelia, thriving. Fudge said, clapping Amelia on the shoulder. She didn't flinch, but her smile was frosty. A credit to the ministry, this whole arrangement. Shows we're taking care of our own, a symbol of the peace we've built. Amelia deftly extracted them from Fudge's orbit, steering them toward a quieter group near a bubbling fountain. Here were people Amelia actually respected. An elderly wizard with a kind, tired face she introduced as Elphias Doge, an old friend of your parents, and a severe-looking witch with an eagle-eye gaze, Griselda Marchbanks, of the Wizarding Examinations Authority. Doge's eyes grew watery behind his spectacles. You have Lily's eyes, my boy, he said, his voice trembling. Such a bright, bright witch. And James's, spirit, I'm sure. He seemed too overcome to say more. Madame Marchbanks peered at Harry as if assessing a difficult exam question. Heard you're starting late. See you catch up. Hogwarts won't coddle you, bones or no bones. I don't expect it to, ma'am, Harry found himself saying, and Marchbanks gave a grudging nod of approval. It continued like this for what felt like hours. A parade of faces and names that blurred together. Some looked at him with naked awe. Some with calculating curiosity. A few, like a sleek, blond man with a cold smile who Amelia pointedly did not approach. Lucius Malfoy, she identified later, looked at him with icy disdain. Susan was his anchor. When a particularly enthusiastic witch tried to pinch his cheek, Susan smoothly stepped between them, asking a question about the witch's peacock feather hat. When a ministry official droned on about Harry's historic role, Susan pretended to spot a friend and pulled Harry away. He was using his occlumency not to shield thoughts, but to shield his energy. Building a calm, quiet center amid the storm of attention. The tower room in his mind was a sanctuary he could visit with a single, deep breath. He was beginning to think he might survive the ordeal when he saw the man by the punch bowl. He was tall and gaunt, with long, greasy black hair and a hooked nose. He stood apart, dressed in somber black robes, holding a glass he wasn't drinking from. His dark eyes were fixed on Harry with an intensity that felt different from all the other stares. It wasn't our curiosity. It was assessment. A bitter, sharp, and deeply personal scrutiny. Harry felt a sudden, inexplicable chill. His scar gave a faint, warning prickle. Amelia followed his gaze. Her jaw tightened. Severus Snape, she said, her voice low. Potions master at Hogwarts. A former associate of your mother's. And a man with a complicated past. He is here as Dumbledore's eyes, no doubt. Come, it is time for some refreshment. But as they turned, Snape moved. He cut through the crowd with a predatory grace, arriving before them as if materializing from smoke. Madame Bones, he said, his voice a soft, deep drawl that held no warmth. A surprisingly public outing. Severus, Amelia replied, her tone neutral. The weather demanded it. Snape's black eyes slid to Harry. They were bottomless, inscrutable pools. Mr. Potter, the stories of your upbringing have been greatly circulated. You appear intact. The way he said it made it sound like an insult. Harry, following his training, said nothing, just met the man's gaze. Up close, he looked tired, and there was a sallow, unhealthy cast to his skin. He is well, Amelia stated. I observe the ring, Snape continued, his lip curling slightly. The Potter arrogance, made manifest. I trust your tutors are emphasizing control over flashy displays of inherited wealth. Something hot and defensive flared in Harry's chest. Before he could think, he felt his mental stag give a warning stamp. He channeled the feeling into his occlumency walls, reinforcing them, making his mind a smooth, unreadable surface. My tutors are emphasizing what is necessary, sir, he said, his voice quieter than he intended. Snape's eyes narrowed, almost imperceptibly. He was looking for something, a crack, a flash of temper, a glimpse of the wild magic Figworth described. Harry gave him nothing but a polite, blank facade. After a moment that stretched too long, Snape gave a curt nod, more to Amelia than to Harry. Dumbledore sends his regards. He remains concerned. With a final, lingering look that felt like a cold touch on Harry's scar, Snape melted back into the crowd. Harry let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He was trying to read me, he whispered to Amelia. I know, she said. And he failed. That is a victory, Harry. A small, but significant one. The encounter left him shaken. The party's gaiety now felt brittle, a thin veneer over deep, dark currents. He saw the watching eyes differently now. Not all were friendly. Some were like Snape's, watchful, waiting. As the sun began to set, lighting the floating lanterns from within, Amelia signaled it was time to leave. They made their way back toward the elevators, the crowd parting once more. Harry felt exhaustion seeping into his bones, a deep weariness of the spirit. They were steps from the elevator when a woman broke from the crowd. She was plump and kind-faced, with flyaway gray hair and slightly crossed eyes. She looked nervous but determined. Madam Bones. A moment, please, she called, hurrying forward. She was clutching a beaded handbag. I'm so sorry to bother, I'm Arabella Figg, I live near his old, I just wanted to say, I'm so glad he's well, I always. As she spoke, she fumbled with the clasp of her bag. It sprang open, not much, just a few inches. But from within, something small, dark, and fast shot out. It wasn't aimed at Amelia. It wasn't aimed at Susan. It was a tiny, black dart, humming with malevolent magic, streaking straight for Harry's throat. Time didn't slow. It exploded. Amelia's wand was a blur. A shield, not the gentle Protega, but a violent, concussive repello that erupted from her in a visible shockwave. It knocked the dart sideways, but also sent Arabella Figg stumbling back with a cry. Harry didn't think. He didn't cast. His body moved on the instinct Amelia had drilled into him. He dropped into a crouch, his practice wand, the only one he had, coming up not to shield himself, but to point at the ground between him and the source of the threat. Glacius, he yelled, the freezing spell one Figworth had described just days before. A sheet of ice, jagged and sudden, erupted from the cobbles, creating a low, slippery barrier. The dart, deflected, zinged overhead and embedded itself in the elevator door with a sickening thunk, sizzling with dark purple smoke. Chaos erupted. Screams. Dawlish and Savage were there, wands out, shoving people back, securing the stunned, weeping misses. Fig. Amelia stood over Harry, her wand sweeping the crowd, her body a rigid shield between him and the world. Susan was pressed against his side, her face white but her own hand clenched around a small, practice holly wand she'd brought for show. Are you hurt? Amelia barked, not looking at him. No, Harry gasped, his heart hammering against his ribs. The ice at his feet was already melting in the summer evening air. Amelia's eyes were blazing with cold fury. She looked at the dart, at the sobbing woman, at the horrified crowd. The garden party was over. Or Dawlish. Take Mrs. Figg into custody. Secure the artifact. I want her memory examined, her background torn apart. This was not her doing. She was a vehicle. Her voice cut through the panic like a knife. She turned, finally looking down at Harry, at the melting ice, at his raised wand. Her expression was unreadable. Then she addressed the silent, shocked crowd, her voice magically amplified, ringing across the gardens. This is the world that remains, she declared, every word dripping with contempt. Where a child cannot attend a party without an assassination attempt. Take a good look. This is Harry Potter. He is not hiding. He is not a symbol to be weaponized. He is a boy, and he is under my protection. Let today be a lesson to any who think otherwise. She turned her back on them all. Harry, Susan, we are leaving. They stepped into the private elevator, the doors closing on a sea of stunned, silent faces. The gilded cage of the garden was behind them. But the attack had made one thing brutally clear. The fortress walls of Bones Manor were high. But the enemy was already inside the gates. And they were willing to use kindly, cross-eyed old women to deliver their poison. Chapter 9, The Poison in the Pillar. The aftermath of the garden party was a silent, furious storm contained within the stone walls of the manor. Amelia vanished into the ministry, her absence a palpable tension. Dawlish and Savage were replaced by a full squad of 4 Aurors, their faces grim and unfamiliar. The wards hummed with a new, aggressive frequency that made the air taste of ozone. Mrs. Fig, they learned via a tersely worded ministry memo, was a squib, a non-magical person born to magical parents. She had been under a subtle, complex imperious curse, layered with memory charms. The beaded bag had been gifted to her by a charming door-to-door salesman who had since vanished. The dart was a Peruvian vipertooth venom-tipped needle, enchanted for stealth and speed. A child's toy, designed for a single, silent kill. Harry couldn't stop seeing it. The tiny, black streak, the sizzle against the metal door. He practiced his shield charm in the cellar until he collapsed, the image of the dart fueling a desperate, furious precision. His Protega began to spring up faster, harder. He could now hold it under the assault of 2 training dummies at once. But the true battle was in his mind. The attack had been intimate, personal. It hadn't been a curse from the shadows, but a violation of a kind-looking woman, turned into a puppet. It made the world feel unreliable, every face a potential mask. Medea Selwyn's lessons took on a new urgency. The attempt was physical, but its true weapon was psychological, she said, her cedar and snow presence a cool anchor in the library. It was meant to shatter your sense of safety, to make you distrust the world Amelia is trying to integrate you into. We must fortify against that as well. She taught him to compartmentalize. The memory of the dart, the fear, the shock, she had him visualize locking it away in a heavy, iron-bound chest in a new room off his mental hallway. The room of recent trauma, she called it. Acknowledge it, label it, then seal it away. It is a fact, not a constant experience. Do not let it bleed into your present. It was hard, grueling work. The memory fought back, flashing behind his eyes at quiet moments. But the stag stood guard over the new room's door, and slowly, the sharp edges of the terror began to dull. Susan was his constant, quiet support. She didn't try to jolly him out of his silence. She simply was there, reading in the same room, walking the grounds with him under Auror escort, pointing out a rare breed of dirical that had nested in the hedges. Her steadiness was a balm. A week after the attack, Amelia returned. She looked older, the lines around her mouth deeper, but her spine was straighter than ever. She summoned Harry to her study. The investigation is concluded, she said without preamble. The curse work was masterful, untraceable to a specific caster. The venom is commonly available on the black market. Mrs. Fig has been cleared and released, with our apologies and a memory modification for her own peace of mind. She will remember spilling punch on a ministry official, nothing more. Harry nodded, relief for the kind-eyed woman mixing with a sour disappointment. No answers. This changes our timeline, Amelia continued. The party was a statement. The attack was a counter-statement. We cannot wait until you are 11 to begin your proper magical education. You will start wandcrafting next week. Harry's head snapped up. Wandcrafting. Your practice wand is a tool, but it is not yours. A bonded wand is an extension of the wizard. It will give you focus, control, and power you cannot imagine. Your magic is a guardian, Harry. It needs a spear as well as a shield. The following Monday, a wizard named Ollivander arrived at Bones Manor. He was ancient, with wide, pale eyes like moons. He didn't seem to notice the heightened security, the watching Aurors. His entire being was focused on Harry. Harry Potter, he whispered, his voice dry as fallen leaves. Yes, yes. I wondered when I would be seeing you. Your mother's wand was 10¼ inches, willow, swishy, excellent for charm work. Your father's was mahogany, 11 inches, pliable, good for transfiguration. Let us see what chooses you. He opened his long, dusty boxes, laying wand after wand on the table in the drawing room. Harry tried them. A maple wand with unicorn hair produced only a faint, sad breeze. Ebony and dragon heartstring made the windows rattle ominously. Hawthorn and phoenix feather sparked angrily, burning his fingers. Ollivander grew more and more excited with each failure. Tricky customer, E.H. Not to worry, we will find your perfect match. Perhaps, yes, why not? He pulled out a long, slender box from deep within his case. A unusual combination. Hollywood. 11 inches. Nice and supple. And for the core, he opened the box. Inside, on faded purple velvet, lay a pale wand. A phoenix feather. From a phoenix who gave only one other feather. That other wand, well, it did great things. Terrible, yes, but great. Harry didn't like the sound of that. But he reached for the holly wand. The moment his fingers closed around it, warmth flooded his arm. A shower of red and gold sparks, not violent, but joyful, erupted from the tip, filling the room with a cascade of light that smelled of cinnamon and wood smoke. The ring on his finger grew warm in response. In his mind, the silver stag raised its head and gave a soundless call. Ollivander let out a sharp breath. Curious, very curious. The wand of holly chooses a wizard destined for danger, and a life of struggle. Phoenix feather, such a core is picky. It is said that wands with phoenix feather cores are capable of the greatest range of magic, but they can be slow to reveal themselves. They show the most initiative. This is a powerful wand, Mr. Potter. And it has chosen you. I wonder. He peered at Harry's scar, his pale eyes unblinking. The other wand, the brother to this phoenix feather, it was 13.5 inches, you. It belongs to the wizard who gave you that scar. He who must not be named. A cold knot tightened in Harry's stomach. Brother wands. Linked, like he and Voldemort were linked. Amelia, who had been observing silently, stepped forward. Thank you, Mr. Ollivander. The wand is chosen. That is what matters. Ollivander packed his remaining boxes, his expression one of deep fascination. Yes, yes, chosen. I shall be most interested to see what you do together, Mr. Potter. Most interested indeed. With the holly wand in his hand, everything changed. In the training room, his spells were no longer hesitant streams of magic, but clean, sharp lines of intent. His protega wasn't a wobbly disc, it was a solid, shimmering wall of silver light that rang like a bell when struck. He could finally levitate the feather, not just lift it, but send it soaring in loops and dives, controlled by the merest flick of his wrist. The wand felt like a missing limb restored. It channeled the wild, guardian magic within him, giving it shape and purpose. The magical theory that had seemed so abstract suddenly made sense. The wand was the focus, the will was the fuel. Amelia pushed him harder. They began on offensive spells. Simple ones, the disarming charm, Expelliarmus. The jelly legs jinx. The trip jinx. Harry took to them with a focused intensity. He wasn't learning to duel, he was learning to survive. Each spell was a tool to create distance, to disarm a threat, to buy time for his shield or for help to arrive. One afternoon, as he practiced disarming a training dummy, his spell went wide, blasting a chunk out of the stone wall. Amelia didn't reprimand him. She studied the damage, then him. Power you have in abundance, she said. Control is your battlefield. And control is born of understanding. It is time you learned why your magic feels the way it does. That evening, after dinner, she led him not to the training room, but to the oldest part of the manor's library. She pulled down a heavy, leather-bound tome. Magical lineages and inherited gifts. Magical talent often runs in families, not just in blood, but in specific aptitudes, she explained, opening the book to a chapter on the Potter line. The Potters have always had an affinity for two areas, transfiguration, and a rarer, more instinctual gift. They were known as exceptional animagi, and famously gifted in protective magic. Your grandfather's work in potions was really advanced charm work applied to brewing. She pointed to a passage. It is speculated that a Potter ancestor was a praesidium, an ancient term for a guardian mage. Their magic is intrinsically tied to defense, to preservation. It reacts most powerfully to threat, not to abstract will. This is why your shield came before your levitation. It is why your magic, spasmed, to heal you. It is not wild, Harry. It is primed. It is a soldier waiting for a war. Harry stared at the words on the page. Praesidium. A guardian mage. It resonated deep within him, with the feeling of the wall springing from his palm, with the stag in his mind. So, it's not that I'm bad at other magic. It is that your core magic defines itself as a shield first. Once you master that identity, the other branches, the levitation, the charms, even the transfiguration your family is known for, will follow. They will be tools used in service of that central purpose, protection. It was the first time his magic made sense not as a problem, but as a purpose. The realization was a key turning in a lock. In his next occlumency session, he didn't just visualize the stag as a sentinel. He imagined the walls of his tower not as stone, but as intertwined strands of holly and silver light, alive with the same protective intent as his shield charm. The mental fortress grew stronger, more integrated with his magical core. He was not just building walls. He was becoming a citadel. A few nights later, he dreamed. Not of green light, but of the garden party. He saw the dart, moving in slow motion. But this time, instead of Amelia's shield, he saw his own hand come up, his holly wand flashing. Not a shield. A bolt of white gold light that met the dart in midair, not deflecting it, but unraveling it, turning it into a harmless shower of black dust. He woke, not with a start, but with a calm certainty. The fear from the attack was still in its iron chest, but it no longer controlled him. It was a lesson, a motivation. At breakfast, Amelia reviewed his schedule. Medea this morning, history of magic with Figworth after lunch. Then, we have a practical test. What kind of test? She met his eyes, her monocle glinting. You have a wand. You have a shield. You have a purpose. Now, we see if you can protect someone other than yourself. That afternoon, in the training room, Susan stood against the far wall. Amelia stood next to Harry. Your objective is simple. Susan is the target. I am the threat. Keep my spells from reaching her. Use any means we have practiced. Disarm, shield, impede. You may not attack me directly. Your goal is her safety. Susan gave him a small, nervous smile. Harry's heart began to pound. This was different. This was real. Amelia didn't give a countdown. She simply raised her wand. Stupefy. The red stunner wasn't slow. It was a professional's cast, fast and precise, aimed straight for Susan's center mass. Protega. Harry roared, slashing his wand in a wide arc. The silver wall erupted not in front of him, but across the room, intercepting the stunner a foot from Susan. The impact shook the air. Amelia didn't pause. A tripped jinx shot low. Harry transfigured a section of the floor in front of Susan into a soft mound of cushions, swallowing the jinx. A disarming charm, scarlet and sharp. Harry met it with his own Expelliarmus, not to disarm Amelia, but to intercept midair. The two spells collided with a crack, dissipating. He was moving, positioning himself between Amelia and Susan, not statically, but fluidly, using footwork she drilled into him. He wasn't just casting, he was interposing. His magic felt different, not a desperate reaction, but a flowing, proactive defense. It was like his shield had become a living thing, extending from his wand to encompass Susan. Amelia increased the pressure. Two spells in quick succession, a stinger to Harry's left, a mild constricting jinx aimed to snake around his legs and bind him. He shielded the stinger, and with a frantic, slicing motion of his wand, conjured a gust of wind ventus. That disrupted the jinx before it could take hold. He was tiring. Sweat stung his eyes. Susan was safe, but he was being worn down. Amelia saw it. She changed tactics. She cast a wide area blanket jinx, a shimmering net of magic meant to envelop them both. Harry couldn't block it all. In a split-second decision, he didn't try. He turned his back to the net, facing Susan, and poured everything into a single, focused shield around the two of them, a dome of solid silver light. The net hit the dome, sizzling and dissolving against its surface. The effort buckled Harry's knees. He gasped, the dome flickering. Amelia lowered her wand. The room was silent save for Harry's ragged breathing. Susan stepped out from behind him, her eyes wide. You did it, she whispered. Amelia walked forward. She looked at the fading shimmer of the dome, at the scorch marks on the floor from intercepted spells, at Harry leaning on his wand, exhausted but upright. Well, Harry panted, searching her face for judgment. Amelia Bones did not smile often. But a faint, approving light softened the severity of her gaze. Adequate, she said. Then, after a pause that stretched, she added, the Praesidium stands. It was the highest praise he would ever receive from her. He had protected, not just himself. He had become a pillar between the threat and the innocent. The wand in his hand was warm. The ring on his finger felt light. The fortress in his mind stood firm. He was not just surviving. He was learning what it meant to be a Potter. To be a Bones. To be a guardian. The path ahead was still dark. But he was no longer just a boy walking it. He was becoming a light that the darkness would have to break itself against. Chapter 10. Echoes in the Dark. The adequate from Amelia rang in Harry's ears for days, a private, sustaining warmth against the creeping autumn chill. The manor grounds turned fiery with the colors of fall, but the beauty was edged with a new sharpness. The attack had shifted something fundamental. Security wasn't just a procedure, it was the very air they breathed. The Aurors, patrols were more visible, their eyes constantly scanning the tree line. Mipsy took to checking every parcel and piece of post with paranoid dedication, her large ears twitching at every owl's hoot. Harry's days took on a brutal, satisfying rhythm. Mornings were for occlumency with Medea, who was now having him construct entire wings onto his mental fortress, a library for studied knowledge, an armory for practiced spells, all guarded by the silent, silver stag. Afternoons were split, theory with Figworth, and relentless practicals with Amelia. The training scenarios grew more complex. Susan was often the civilian, to be protected, but sometimes it was a conjured figurine, or a specific object. The threats multiplied, 2 training dummies attacking from different angles, environmental hazards like conjured ice or fire that Harry had to shield against while maintaining his primary defense. His magic, channeled through the Holly wand, responded with a fierce loyalty. The guardian core within him was no longer a spasm, it was a honed reflex. His Protega could now snap into a full dome around a target in an instant. His disarming charm was swift and accurate. He'd even managed a basic human presencing spell, Hominum Revelio, to track the hidden training dummies, though it gave him a pounding headache. Yet, for all his progress in defense, other magics remained stubbornly difficult. Charms like the color change charm, Colivaria, or the mending charm, Reparo, were sluggish, requiring immense concentration for mediocre results. Transfiguration, the Potter family's supposed forte, was a particular frustration. Turning a match into a needle left him with a sad, slightly pointy piece of wood. It was as if his magic saw no threat in a mismatched sock or a blunt match, and thus refused to fully engage. It is a matter of perspective, Medea said during one session, as he described the block. Your magic defines itself through the lens of protection. To transfigure an object is to fundamentally change its nature, to impose your will upon it for a new purpose. Perhaps you must frame it as an act of protection. Not, I am changing this match, but, I am making this needle to mend a cloak, to secure a shelter. Give your guardian a mission. He tried it that evening, alone in the library with a box of matches. He didn't think about the match. He thought of Susan's cloak, which had a small tear from catching on a rose bush. He imagined the needle, sharp and true, threading itself to repair the breach in her defense against the cold. He pointed his wand. Acus. The match shivered, silvery light racing along its length. It didn't just sharpen, it refined, the wood smoothing into polished steel, a perfect, tiny eye forming at one end. A needle. Not a masterwork, but a real, functional needle. He stared at it, a laugh of pure surprise bubbling in his throat. It wasn't about power. It was about purpose. He brought the needle to Susan at breakfast. For your cloak, he said, feeling suddenly shy. She took it, her face breaking into a delighted smile. You made this. It's perfect. The simple, genuine praise felt better than any successful shield charm. Amelia, observing over the rim of her teacup, gave a single, slow nod. The lesson was learned. The external world, however, was not so easily reframed. The Daily Prophet, which Amelia usually read with cynical detachment, began to carry unsettling murmurs. Not about Harry directly, but shadows of the past. There were reports of Dementor sightings near remote wizarding villages. A mysterious break-in at a low-security ministry archive, where nothing seemed to be taken. An opinion piece, written by a wizard named Xenophilius Lovegood, speculating about the resurgent stirrings of Nargles and old magic, which Amelia dismissed as nonsense but which made Harry's scar prickle unpleasantly. Then, the letter came for Susan. A large, handsome eagle owl delivered it. The parchment was thick, the green ink elegant. Susan opened it, her eyes scanning the contents before her face fell. It's an invitation, she said, her voice flat. To a children's seasonal gala, at Malfoy Manor. Hosted by Draco Malfoy. It says, guests are encouraged to bring a companion. She pushed it across the table to Amelia, who read it, her expression hardening into something dangerous. A companion, Amelia repeated, the word tasting foul. They mean Harry. This is Lucius Malfoy's doing. An attempt to get a look at you, Harry, on neutral, or rather, on his, ground. To assess you outside my shadow. We're not going, Susan said immediately, a protective fire in her eyes that mirrored her aunt's. No, Amelia agreed. We are not. But she didn't crumple the letter. She held it, thinking. However, a flat refusal can be spun as fear, or isolationism. Lucius is a master of social maneuvering. We must answer in kind. She penned a reply that afternoon, Harry and Susan watching. It was a masterpiece of polite brutality. It thanked them for the generous invitation, regretted that prior family commitments, namely, intensive magical tutoring and a prior engagement with the Longbottom family, prevented their attendance. It wished young Draco a pleasant gathering. By naming the solidly light, but famously reclusive, Longbottoms, and emphasizing Harry's education, she simultaneously provided an unassailable excuse, hinted at powerful alliances, and underscored that Harry was too busy becoming someone to attend trivial parties. The game is not just fought with wands, she said, sealing the letter with the Bones crest. It is fought with parchment and implication. Remember that. The Malfoys' response was silence. But the gauntlet had been thrown, and caught. A different kind of echo arrived a few days later, in the form of a ministry interdepartmental memo that zoomed into the study and unfolded itself before Amelia. She read it, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. There's been an incident, she said, her voice carefully controlled. At Azkaban, a guard rotation reported disturbances. In the high-security wing. Inmates talking in their sleep. The same words. A name. She looked at Harry. They were whispering, Potter. A cold knot formed in Harry's stomach. Azkaban. Where the worst of Voldemort's followers were held. Where the Dementors glided. Is it the connection? He asked, his own voice sounding distant. Like the snake dreaming my dreams. It is possible the scar's activity resonates in sympathetic minds, especially those already fractured by darkness and Dementor exposure, Amelia said, but she didn't sound convinced. Or it is a coordinated attempt to unnerve us, to make us feel watched from within our own strongest prison. She stood, pacing. I will have to go there. To inspect the wards, to interrogate the guards personally. You can't. Susan burst out. It's horrible there. The Dementors. They are under ministry control, for now, Amelia said, though her face was grim. And if there is a weakness in our greatest prison, I must see it. Dawlish will be in command here. You will both adhere to the lockdown protocol. No lessons. Stay in the main house. Is that clear? It was clear. The idea of Amelia going to that awful place, surrounded by Dementors and whispering Death Eaters, was terrifying. But arguing with Amelia Bones when her mind was set was like arguing with a glacier. She left at dawn the next day, cloaked and severe. The manor felt cavernous without her. The Aurors were visibly on edge. Figworth and Medea sent notes postponing lessons. Time stretched, thin and anxious. To distract themselves, Susan convinced Harry to explore the one part of the manor they usually avoided, the East Wing, which was mostly unused, full of shrouded furniture and old portraits of long-dead Bones ancestors who grumbled at being disturbed. They were in a dusty solar, sunlight cutting through motes in the air, when Susan found the cabinet. It was a tall, black lacquered thing, hidden behind a moth-eaten tapestry. Its doors were locked, but the lock was ornate and old. Susan, with a mischievous glint in her eye, pulled a hairpin from her braid. Auntie doesn't know I can do this, she whispered. Watch. She inserted the pin, her ear pressed to the cool wood, wiggling it with a delicate concentration Harry associated with her potion making. After a minute, there was a soft, satisfying click. The cabinet door swung open. Inside were not old clothes or boring heirlooms. It was a collection of objects that hummed with a low, potent magic. A tarnished silver whistle. A dagger with a blade that seemed to drink the light. A compass whose needle spun lazily, pointing not north, but at Harry, then Susan, then the window. And on a small velvet stand, a smooth, gray river stone, perfectly ordinary except for the feeling of immense, patient weight that emanated from it. Family artifacts, Susan breathed, her voice full of awe. Auntie must have sealed them away for safety. Harry reached out, not to touch, but to feel the magic. The stone called to him. Its magic felt familiar. Solid. Unyielding. Like the foundation of the manor itself. Like a perfected version of his own guardian core. His fingers were an inch from it when the stone moved. It didn't roll. It lifted, drifting from its stand to hover before his palm. A warm, earthy resonance vibrated up his arm, syncing with the pulse of the Potter ring. In his mind, the silver stag didn't tense in warning, it bowed its head, as if in recognition. "Harry," Susan whispered, stunned. He closed his hand around the stone. It was warm, not with heat, but with a deep, geothermal energy. Knowledge, not in words, but in understanding, flowed into him. It was a ward key. A Bones family relic, attuned to the very bedrock the manor was built upon. It didn't grant control over the wards, that was Amelia's power alone, but it offered an awareness of them. He could feel them now, the intricate web of protective enchantments woven into the stone and soil. Layers of repelling, masking, warning, and solidifying charms, anchored deep in the earth, humming with ancient power. And he felt a tremor. A faint, discordant vibration, like a single harp string plucked wrong, on the far eastern edge of the grounds, near the old forest line. He dropped the stone back onto its stand as if burned. "Something's wrong with the wards." Susan's face paled. "We have to tell Dawlish." They ran, bursting into the main hallway where Dawlish was in low conversation with Orr Savage. "The wards," Harry gasped, out of breath. "On the east border, by the forest, there's a flaw." "I felt it." Dawlish's eyes narrowed. "How could you possibly?" "The ward keystone in the east wing," Susan cut in, her voice firm. "He touched it. He felt it. That got their attention." Dawlish swore under his breath. "Savage, with me. Potter, Bones, to the secure room. Now. Lock the door behind you. Don't open it for anyone but me or Madam Bones. You know the password." The secure room was a small, windowless chamber off the kitchen, lined with protective runes. They barricaded themselves inside, listening to the muffled shouts and running footsteps through the thick door. The minutes ticked by, each one an eternity. Then they heard it, not from outside, but from within the house. A crash, the distinct, sizzling crack of a spell impacting stone. A shout that was abruptly cut off. Susan's hand found Harry's, her grip vice-tight. He had his wand out, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. His occlumency walls were up, the stag pacing restlessly. The holly wand felt alive in his hand, humming with readiness. Another crash, closer. The sound of a struggle in the main hall. A voice, harsh and guttural, yelled, "Find the boy." They were inside. The wards had been breached, or bypassed. The door to the secure room shuddered. Not a knock. A heavy, magical blow that made the runes on the door flare a sickly yellow. "Alohomora." A voice snarled from the other side. The lock resisted, but Harry heard it strain. He looked at Susan, her face a mask of fear but her jaw set. He pointed his wand at the door, then at the blank wall behind them. "When it breaks, I'll shield. You run for the kitchen flow. Call the ministry. I'm not leaving you. Susan, please." His voice was raw with a fear he forced down. This was the test. Protect the civilian. Get help. It's the best way to protect us both. Tears welled in her eyes, but she gave a sharp, desperate nod. The door shook again. A crack appeared in the wood. The runes were fading. Harry positioned himself, his entire world narrowing to the splintering door. He thought not of himself, but of Susan behind him, of the stone walls of his mind, of the purpose of his magic. Praesidium. The door exploded inward in a shower of splinters and dark smoke. A figure stood in the doorway, hooded and masked, his robes dark and shabby. A Death Eater. The mask was a twisted silver sneer. He raised his wand. "There you. Protega totalum." Harry roared, pouring every ounce of his will into the spell. Not a dome around himself, but a solid, blinding wall of silver light that filled the entire doorway, sealing it like molten metal. The Death Eater's curse, a sickly yellow, slammed into the shield and rebounded, forcing him to duck. "Persistent little rat," he spat. "Go." Harry screamed at Susan. She darted past him, not for the blasted doorway, but for a small, almost invisible servant's hatch in the corner of the room he hadn't noticed. She wrenched it open and vanished into the darkness beyond. The Death Eater snarled and began hammering at the shield with blasting curses. Bombarda. The shield held, but each impact was a physical blow against Harry's concentration. He felt his magic straining, draining. He couldn't hold this forever. He had to fight back. Not to win, but to survive long enough for Susan to get help. As the Death Eater prepared another curse, Harry dropped the shield. The man staggered, off balance for a split second. "Expelliarmus!" Harry shouted. The red jet was true and fast. It caught the Death Eater in the chest, but he was older, stronger, anchored. He grunted, his wand arm jerking, but he didn't lose his grip. His free hand shot out, and a rope of dark magic shot from his fingers, aiming to bind Harry. Harry dove sideways, rolling behind an overturned table. The rope smashed it to pieces. He came up casting Stupefy. The stunner was deflected with a contemptuous flick. The Death Eater advanced. Trained, are you? Let's see how your little shields hold against this. Cruck. A jet of scarlet light from the shattered hallway hit the Death Eater in the back, slamming him into the wall. Dawlish stood in the ruins of the doorway, his face bloody but his eyes blazing. Savage was behind him, covering the hall. Down, Potter! Dawlish yelled. Harry dropped as another curse, this one from a second, unseen assailant in the hall, sizzled over his head. The fight became a blur of light and noise. Dawlish and Savage dueled the two Death Eaters in the confined space, curses ricocheting, destroying the remains of the secure room. Harry crouched behind the only solid cover left, the heavy, lacquered cabinet they'd found. He couldn't get a clear shot. He saw Savage take a cutting curse to the leg and fall. Dawlish was fighting both, a desperate, brilliant display of defensive and offensive magic, but he was being pushed back. The first Death Eater, recovering, turned his wand from Dawlish back to Harry, a killing intent in the set of his shoulders. In that moment, Harry didn't see a training dummy. He saw the black dart. He saw the whispering walls of Azkaban. He saw Susan's terrified face. The guardian core within him didn't flare in panic. It crystallized into a single, cold point of will. This was not just a threat to him. It was a threat to his home. To his family. He didn't shout. He thought of the stone. Of the wards. Of the deep, grounding power of the earth beneath the manor. He pointed his wand not at the man, but at the floor between them. Firmamento. It wasn't a spell he'd been taught. It wasn't in any of his books. It was an instinct, a demand ripped from the deepest part of his magical heritage. The Praesidium's command. The ancient floorboards didn't just splinter. They erupted. A column of solid, gray stone, veined with silver like the Bones wards, shot upward from the foundations, catching the Death Eater under the chin with a sickening crunch. He was lifted off his feet and thrown back, his body crumpling against the far wall, unconscious or dead. The second Death Eater froze, staring at the impossible, jagged pillar of living rock now occupying the room. Dawlish didn't hesitate. His stunner took the man full in the face. Silence, broken by groans and the crackle of dying magic. Dawlish stood panting, staring at the stone pillar, then at Harry, who was slumped against the cabinet, his wand hand trembling violently. The pillar began to crumble, dissolving into gravel and dust, leaving only a scar on the floor and an unmoving body. Merlin's beard, Dawlish breathed. Running footsteps. Amelia's voice, sharp with a fear Harry had never heard, echoed from the hall. Harry. Susan. In here. Dawlish called. Amelia burst into the ruined room, her robes singed, her hair escaping its bun, her monocle gone. Her eyes swept the scene, the fallen Aurors, the stunned Death Eaters, the dust-choked air, and Harry, wide-eyed and shaking against the cabinet. Then Susan tumbled out of the servant's hatch behind her, covered in cobwebs but unharmed. Auntie. I couldn't get to the flow, it was cut, I had to hide. Amelia crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled them both into a crushing, fierce embrace. It lasted only a second before she released them, her commander's mask slamming back into place, but her hands on their shoulders were unsteady. Report, she barked at Dawlish, her voice rough. Coordinated breach. Ward weakening hex applied at the forest line, a professional job. Then a localized portkey to bypass the main perimeter. 3 attackers. 1 dead by geological intervention. He glanced at the rubble and Harry. Savage is injured. Mipsy is securing the lower floors. The intruders are alive, for now. Amelia's gaze finally settled on Harry. On the dust in his hair, on the holly wand still clutched in his white-knuckled hand, on the ring gleaming amidst the grime. She saw the boy who had faced a killing curse as an infant, the child from the cupboard, the student in the training room. And she saw something new. The wizard who had called the bones of the earth to defend his home. The portkey, she said, her voice deathly quiet. Where did it bring them from? Dawlish's face was grim. Traces indicate the outer perimeter of Azkaban. The echo had not just been a whisper. It had been a beacon. Amelia turned to look at the unconscious Death Eaters, her expression promising a storm of retribution. Then she looked back at Harry and Susan, safe amidst the wreckage. The fortress had been tested. It had held. But the walls now bore the marks of the siege. And the boy within them had learned that his magic could do more than shield. It could strike with the weight of the very earth. Chapter 11. The Unmaking. The aftermath of the attack was a cold, methodical fury. The manor was no longer a home with security, it was a crime scene, a command post, and a hospital ward. Healers from St. Mungo's arrived in a flurry of green robes, tending to a groggy savage and a concussed Dawlish. Unspeakables from the Department of Mysteries, their faces obscured by deep hoods, moved through the ruined secure room and the breach point in the eastern wards, their instruments humming as they took readings of the residual magic. Harry was sequestered in the library with Susan, both wrapped in thick blankets despite the fire Mipsy had built to roaring heights. Shock held him in a numb grip. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. He could still feel the jolt of the stone column erupting, a phantom echo in his bones. He'd made the earth move. He might have killed a man. Amelia was everywhere at once. Directing the healers, conferring with the unspeakables in low, clipped tones, barking orders to a fresh squad of grim-faced Aurors who reinforced the perimeter. Her monocle was back, a disc of cold focus. But Harry saw the minute tremor in her hand as she accepted a report, the way her eyes kept flicking to him and Susan, confirming they were still there, still whole. The two surviving Death Eaters were bound in anti-magical restraints and whisked away to the Ministry's highest security holding cells, not Azkaban. They came from there, Amelia said darkly. They won't be returning until we know how. It was past midnight when the flurry of activity subsided. The healers left. The unspeakables departed with their data. The new Aurors settled into their patrols. The manor was quiet again, but the silence was bruised, pregnant with threat. Amelia finally came to the library. She looked exhausted, her stern features etched with deep lines. She dismissed a worried Mipsy and sat in the armchair opposite them. Susan. The servants' passage. That was quick thinking. You followed the emergency protocol perfectly. You kept your head. Susan nodded, a fragile pride breaking through her shell-shocked expression. Now, bed. You need rest. Susan didn't argue. She gave Harry one last, worried look and left, her footsteps echoing in the too quiet hall. Amelia turned her full attention to Harry. She didn't speak for a long moment, just studied him, the dried blood on his temple from a flying splinter, the haunted look in his eyes behind his glasses, the way he seemed to be holding himself very still. Tell me what happened, she said. Not a demand, but an invitation. From the moment you felt the ward tremor. He told her. The discovery of the artifacts, the stone, the vibration. Dawlish's orders. The door exploding, sending Susan away. The duel. The killing curse on the Death Eater's lips. The feeling of the earth's power, the word firmamento tearing from his throat without thought. When he finished, his voice was a ragged whisper. Is he dead? The one eye, with the stone. Amelia's gaze was unwavering. His neck is broken. He died on impact. The confirmation landed like a physical blow. Harry flinched, a hot wave of nausea rising in his throat. He'd done that. He'd taken a life. Look at me, Harry, Amelia's voice cut through the rising panic. It was not gentle, but it was solid, an anchor in the storm of his guilt. You were defending your life, and Susan's, against a marked Death Eater who was seconds from casting an unforgivable curse. You used a form of elemental transfiguration so rare it's considered theoretical. You acted, instinctively, as a praesidium. You protected your home. I killed someone. You neutralized a threat. In war, which this is, there is a distinction. A painful, terrible one, but a distinction nonetheless. She leaned forward, her elbows on her knees. The guilt you feel is not a weakness. It is your humanity. It is what separates you from the people who attacked this house tonight. Remember that. But do not let it paralyze you. You did what was necessary. The burden of that is part of the weight you carry. You must learn to bear it, or it will break you. He wanted to scream that he was already broken, that he was just a kid who wanted to learn spells, not have his home invaded, not have to do that. But the words wouldn't come. He just stared at the patterns in the rug. The spell, Amelia said, changing tack. Firmamento. It is. Not in any standard curriculum. It is an ancient, foundational charm. A word of making, and unmaking, tied to earth magic. The fact that you cast it, wandlessly in its intent if not its form, at the age of 10, She shook her head, a rare expression of awe breaking through her exhaustion. It confirms everything. Your magic is not just defensive. It is architectural. It builds, it fortifies, it grounds. And when necessary, it unmakes threats at their foundation. She stood. You will not sleep tonight. The adrenaline, the shock, will not allow it. So, we will work. Come. She led him not to the cellar, but to her study. She cleared a space on the floor and had him sit. You are brimming with chaotic, traumatized energy. Your magical core is likely unstable. We will ground it. Occlumency of a different sort. She had him close his eyes and focus not on his tower room, but on the physical sensation of the floor beneath him. The solid, unyielding wood and stone. To feel the deep, quiet hum of the manor's foundational wards, weakened but still present. To imagine his own magic, wild and sparking from the fight, seeping down into that foundation, being absorbed and steadied by the ancient earth. It was slow, meditative, agonizing work. His mind wanted to replay the curse light, the crunch of bone, Susan's terrified face. But Amelia's voice was a relentless guide, pulling him back, again and again, to the feeling of solidity beneath him. After an hour, a fragile calm had settled over him. The shaking had mostly stopped. The nausea had receded to a dull ache. This is as important as any shield charm, Amelia said softly. The ability to come back to center after violence. To remember what you are fighting for, not just what you are fighting against. You fight for this. For stability. For home. She handed him a small, smooth stone from a bowl on her desk, an ordinary river pebble. Keep this. When the memories come, hold it. Focus on its weight, its reality. It is a tool, not a weapon. A reminder of foundation. He took it. It was cool and solid in his palm. Now, she said, her business-like tone returning. We must discuss the practical fallout. The attack proves your location is compromised. We cannot stay here indefinitely. A new fear, cold and sharp, pierced the numbness. Are we leaving? Not immediately, and not in fear. But we must be pragmatic. The Bones' ancestral home is a known quantity. We have other properties, safer houses, but they are not home. She sighed, rubbing her temple. Dumbledore will renew his offer of the Fidelius. I am considering it. You said it was a prison. I said it was like a prison. But a prison can also be a fortress. The question is who holds the keys. She looked at him. This is not a decision I will make alone. Your safety is paramount, but your ability to grow, to have a life, is also part of that safety. What is your instinct? Harry thought of the tiny, starry tower room in his mind. A perfect, silent sanctuary. Was that what a life under the Fidelius would be? A bigger, real-world version of that tower. Safe, but utterly alone except for his keeper. Then he thought of Susan's smile in the greenhouse, of learning to make a needle, of the solid weight of the ward keystone. Of the earth rising to his call. That was a life. A hard, dangerous one, but a living one. I don't want to hide, he said, his voice firmer than he expected. Not like that. I want to get stronger. Here, where I can actually do something. Amelia watched him for a long moment, then gave a slow, approving nod. A Bones answer. Very well. We fortify. We adapt. And we strike back. Strike back. Not with wands. With the law. The attack was an act of terrorism. It gives me unprecedented authority. I will tear apart the security protocols at Azkaban. I will audit every ward scheme on every blood-purist family estate. I will make it so that moving against you becomes politically and practically impossible. Her eyes glittered. You will continue your training. But we add a new component, politics. You must understand the world you are defending, in all its messy, corrupt, glorious detail. The next few days were a whirlwind of change. The damaged wing of the manor was sealed off. The wards were not just repaired, but rebuilt with a vicious, layered complexity that made the air taste of mint and iron. Harry's schedule was revised. Medea's occlumency lessons now included mental exercises to process trauma, to compartmentalize the violent memory without burying it. Figworth's history lessons took a sharp turn into modern wizarding law and the structure of the ministry. And Harry began to sit in on Amelia's evening briefings, when she worked from home. He'd sit in a corner, a book on Wizengamot procedure in his lap, listening as she consulted with department heads via Flow, arguing over budget allocations for Auror training, reviewing evidence from the captured Death Eater's minds extracted legally, she assured him, by licensed legilimens. He learned names. Bartemius Crouch, head of the Department of International Magical Cooperation, a man of icy efficiency. Alistair, Mad-Eye, Moody, the legendary, paranoid Auror who growled about constant vigilance, and seemed to think Amelia wasn't being nearly paranoid enough. He saw the deep web of influence and obligation that held the ministry together, and the cracks where dark things could slither through. He also saw Amelia's power. Not just her magic, but her authority. She was feared, respected, and meticulously fair. She built coalitions, called in favors, and crushed opposition with legal precision. She was building a fortress of law and influence around him, stone by bureaucratic stone. A week after the attack, a package arrived. It was plain, brown, and addressed to Harry in an elegant, looping script he didn't recognize. It set off every security charm in the entry hall. Mipsy nearly combusted with anxiety. Amelia examined it with every detection spell known to wizard kind. Clean. And it bears the seal of Gringotts, attesting it has been screened by their curse breakers. Still, she opened it herself. Inside, on a bed of black velvet, was a necklace. A simple, silver chain holding a pendant, a transparent, teardrop-shaped phial, no larger than Harry's thumbnail. Inside the phial, a tiny, swirl of silvery white mist moved lazily, like captured moonlight. There was a note. Harry, your father left this in my keeping, to be given to you when you came of age, or when you faced true darkness. I believe the latter condition has been met. This is a memory of light. A pensive fragment, of a singularly happy moment, sealed for times of shadow. It requires no pensive to view, simply hold it and will yourself to see. Use it when the world seems too dark. It was a joy to watch you at the party. You have her eyes. E.D. Alpheus Doge, Amelia said, her voice softer. He was at the garden party. A true friend to your parents. She handed the necklace to Harry. The magic is ancient and benign. A gift of comfort. Harry took it. The phial was warm against his skin. He didn't open it. He wasn't ready. But he put the chain over his head, tucking the pendant under his shirt. It lay against his chest, a small, warm weight beside the cold river stone. That night, the dreams returned. But not of green light. He was in the ruined secure room again. The Death Eater was advancing, mouthing the killing curse. Harry raised his wand, but no sound came out. The stone column didn't rise. Instead, the floor beneath the Death Eater turned not to stone, but to bottomless black sand. The man didn't scream, he simply sank, silently, swallowed by the earth, his eyes fixed on Harry in blank horror until they vanished. Harry woke with a gasp, the phantom feeling of sand dragging at his own feet. He clutched the river stone in one hand, the memory of light phial in the other. He focused on the stone's solidity, on the deep hum of the manor's wards. The nightmare receded, but a new, chilling understanding took its place. Firmamento was a word of making and unmaking. He had seen the making, the pillar of stone. The dream had shown him the unmaking. His magic could protect. It could build. It could fortify. And, as the black sand in his dream implied, it could also dissolve. It could unmake. Not with violence, but with a terrifying, absolute finality. He lay in the dark, the two talismans in his hands, one of foundation, one of light, and understood the duality of the power growing within him. He was a guardian, but a guardian sometimes had to break things to keep other things safe. The line between defense and destruction was thinner than he'd ever imagined. And he had just taken his first, irrevocable step across it. Chapter 12, The Memory of Light. The dream of sinking sand lingered like a stain on the edge of Harry's consciousness. He didn't tell Amelia or Medea about it. Some instinct, deep and primal, told him to keep this particular fear close, to examine it alone. The power to unmake felt too vast, too dark, to share. It was the shadow side of his guardian core, and he feared giving it a name would make it real. He wore the memory of light phial under his clothes, a secret warmth against his skin. The river stone lived in his pocket, its weight a constant, grounding presence. The two objects became his private anchors, one to light, one to earth. Life at the manor settled into a new, harder rhythm. The attack had stripped away any lingering illusions of childhood. Susan's smiles were fewer, her brow often furrowed in concentration as she pored over her own advanced texts. The playful explorations were over, their time was now dedicated to study, to drills, to the silent, shared understanding that the walls around them were both shelter and target. Harry's political education intensified. He now understood that Amelia's war was fought on two fronts, the overt one with wands, and the covert one within the labyrinth of the ministry. He learned about the Wizengamot, the assembly of witches and wizards that was both high court and parliament. He memorized the major factions, the traditionalist bloc led by ancient families like the Malfoys, the progressive reformers, the neutrals who swayed with the wind, and Amelia's own faction, the Law and Order Coalition, built on her reputation and a network of warriors, hit wizards, and pragmatic bureaucrats. Power here, Amelia explained one evening, pointing to a chart of ministry departments, is not about who casts the strongest curse. It is about who controls the budget for the Auror office, who appoints the Hogwarts Board of Governors, who decides what is classified as a dark artifact, and what is a historical curiosity. Lucius Malfoy understands this. He buys influence, whispers in ears, trades favors. We must counter with something stronger: integrity, evidence, and the unwavering application of the law. She was making good on her promise to strike back. News filtered in via the Daily Prophet and her own reports, a surprise audit of Azkaban's Dementor feeding protocols, the formation of a special commission to review the escape security of all high-risk prisoners, chaired by Amelia herself, a freeze on the import licenses for several rare potion ingredients, commonly used in dark magic, sponsored by a Wizengamot member known to be in Amelia's debt. It was a chess game played with lives and laws, and Harry was her silent apprentice, learning the moves. His magical training took a similarly strategic turn. Figworth, who had been rattled by the attack into a state of permanent fluster, was supplemented by specialist tutors. An elderly, precise witch named Professor Vector came twice a week to introduce him to the basics of arithmancy. All magic has a numerical underpinning, Mr. Potter, she said, her voice like rustling parchment. To understand the why of a spell's structure is to gain greater control over its how. Harry, whose brain still ached from simple sums, found the abstract logic strangely soothing. It was another kind of foundation. Most transformative were the lessons with a grizzled, one-legged wizard named Captain Rookwood, a retired hit wizard who had served with Amelia's brother. Rookwood had no time for flashy dueling. He taught combat magic, efficiency, economy of motion, and fighting to disable or escape, not to dazzle. "You're small," Rookwood barked during their first session in the training room, his wooden leg tapping a steady rhythm on the floor. "Use it. Your enemy expects a stand-up duel. You will not give it to him. You will be a ghost. A thorn." He taught Harry spells he'd never heard of. Obscuro to blind with a conjured blindfold. Impedimenta to slow and tangle. Incarcerus to bind with ropes. He combined them with physical maneuvers, a low sweep of a leg, aim for the knees, always the knees, followed by a swift petrificus totalis. How to use a protega not just as a wall, but as a springboard to change direction. "Your fancy earth magic is a cannon, boy," Rookwood grunted after Harry described, haltingly, the Firmamento incident. "Useful for bringing down a castle. But most fights are won with a dagger in the dark. Be the dagger first. The cannon is your last resort." It was brutal, pragmatic, and it worked. Harry's dueling style lost its last remnants of stiffness. He became fluid, unpredictable. In a spar with a training dummy charmed to Rookwood's specifications, Harry didn't stand and trade spells. He vanished behind a conjured smoke screen, Fumos reappeared on its flank, hit it with a locomotor spell to trip it, and bound it before it could rise. Rookwood gave a single, approving nod. Better. Yet, the core of him remained the guardian. His strongest magic was still reactive, sparked by the intent to protect. During a drill where Susan, under heavy supervision, played a hostage, Harry's shields were faster, stronger, and more intuitively placed than anything he produced on offense. He could feel the magical pathways for defense were wider, more well-traveled within him. One rainy afternoon, stuck indoors, Susan convinced him to try something different. "You're all shields and stunners," she said, setting up a small potions kit on a table in the library. "But what about healing? That's protection too, isn't it? The ultimate protection, putting someone back together." She was studying basic healing magic under the guidance of a family friend who was a Medowitch. She showed him a simple bruise healing paste, the Episci charm for minor wounds, and a calming draft. The magic was subtle, requiring a gentle, precise touch and an understanding of the body's own rhythms. Harry's first attempt at a pisky on a small cut Susan made on a piece of fruit was over-enthusiastic. He sealed the cut, but also turned the apple a vibrant, permanent blue. Susan laughed, not unkindly. Too much power, not enough finesse. Think of it as guiding, not forcing. He tried again, thinking not of the cut, but of the apple's wholeness. Of the skin knitting back together as it was meant to. A soft, silver light, not his usual bright shield silver, but a muted, mother-of-pearl glow emanated from his wand tip. The cut vanished, leaving the apple perfectly normal. Susan's eyes widened. That was advanced. The color of the magic, that's a healer's signature. It was a new facet of his power, one that felt deeply right. Healing was the other side of the Guardian's coin. Not just stopping harm, but repairing it. That night, for the first time since the attack, he felt a fragile sense of equilibrium. He was building an arsenal, of knowledge, of politics, of combat spells, of healing magic. He was not just a victim or a symbol. He was becoming a multifaceted weapon for good, shaped by the hands of Amelia, Medea, Rookwood, and Susan. It was the wrong night for equilibrium. He went to bed, the rain drumming a steady rhythm on the windowpane. He practiced his occlumency, reinforcing the tower, checking the locks on the door to the room of recent trauma. The silver stag stood sentinel. He fell asleep to the sound of the storm. And he dreamed. But it was not his dream. He was in a dark, dank place that smelled of salt, seaweed, and despair. Stone walls, dripping with moisture. The only light came from a tiny, high window, barred, through which a sickly gray dawn filtered. He was not himself. He was looking out through eyes that were not his own, from a body that felt too tall, too thin, racked with a cold that went deeper than bone. A sense of profound, soul-crushing hopelessness pressed in on him, so heavy he couldn't breathe. It was the Dementor's influence, but experienced from within a cell, not as an outside force. This was the despair of years, decades, leeching away all warmth, all memory of joy. Potter, Potter, Potter. The name was a whisper in the cell, not from a mouth, but from the walls themselves, from the rats scuttling in the corners, from the rotten straw on the floor. It was a mantra of obsession, of hatred kept alive by madness in this place of forgotten souls. The eyes he inhabited looked down at long, skeletal hands. The left one bore a dark mark, but it was faded, a grayish scar against pallid skin. But as the whispers grew, Potter, alive, out there, with bones, the mark began to darken. From gray to charcoal. From charcoal to a faint, pulsing black. A burning sensation, not on the skin, but in the blood. A connection, old and foul, stirring like a snake in the sun. Through the barred window, across the impossible distance, the eyes seemed to see a flicker of green light. A boy's face, blurred but familiar. A stone manor. A pillar of earth. A rasping, broken voice, the first sound from this body in perhaps years, grated out into the cell's gloom. He lives at the Bones Manor. The boy is strong. He must be broken before he grows. The connection surged. The dark mark burned jet black. And a wave of pure, vitriolic hate, direct, personal, and aimed squarely at him, flooded through the link, through the scar on Harry's forehead. He woke screaming. The sound was ripped from his throat, raw and terror-stricken. He was sitting bolt upright in bed, drenched in cold sweat, his scar on fire as it had never been before. It felt like a white-hot brand was being pressed into his skull. The green light of the killing curse flashed behind his eyes, mixed with the image of those skeletal hands and the pulsing dark mark. He scrambled out of bed, stumbling to the bathroom, retching over the sink. Nothing came up but bile. The pain in his scar was a blinding agony. He fumbled for the river stone in his pocket, clutching it, but its solidity felt meaningless against this psychic assault. Then his fingers found the file, warm against his chest. Use it when the world seems too dark. Gasping, tears of pain streaming down his face, he tore the file from under his shirt. He didn't know how to will himself to see. He just held it tight in his fist, pressing it against his pounding forehead, and thought, help. Please. The silvery mist inside the file swirled, then burst. Not outwards, but inwards, into his mind. The pain didn't vanish, but it was pushed to the edges. The images of the dank cell receded, replaced by a flood of sensation that was not his own, yet felt like home. Warmth. The soft, clean scent of lilies. A feeling of being held, cradled against a beating heart. A deep, rumbling laugh that vibrated through the small body he inhabited. He was tiny, an infant, looking up. Two faces, blurred by baby vision but radiant with love, smiled down at him. A man with messy hair and glasses, his eyes crinkling. A woman with fiery red hair and emerald eyes, her smile so bright it outshone the sunlit room around them. A finger, large and gentle, stroked his cheek. A voice, his mother's voice, humming a lilting, wordless tune. It was a song of pure, uncomplicated joy. A moment of perfect safety, of being utterly and unconditionally loved. The memory of light unfolded within him, not as a picture, but as an experience. It filled the hollows carved by the Dementor's despair and the Death Eater's hate. It didn't erase the horror, but it sat beside it, a tiny, unquenchable sun. The pain in his scar dulled to a throb. The screaming in his mind quieted. He slid down the bathroom wall to the floor, the file now cool and empty in his hand, the afterglow of the memory warming him from the inside out. He had seen his parents. He had felt their love. It was no longer a story, a photograph. It was a truth etched into his soul. A soft knock, then the door opened. Amelia stood there, dressed in a robe over her nightclothes, her wand drawn, her face taut with alarm. She took in the scene: Harry on the floor, pale and shaking, the empty file in his hand, the sheen of sweat on his skin. The connection, he rasped, before she could ask. It was strong. From Azkaban. He saw me. He felt the attack. He knows where we are. He wants me broken. Amelia's expression turned to granite. She knelt, checking his temperature with the back of her hand, her eyes on his scar. The memory. It helped. It showed me them. A complex emotion flickered across her face: grief, sympathy, resolve. Good. That is its purpose. She helped him to his feet. The vision. Tell me everything. He did, his voice growing steadier as he recounted the details. The cell, the hands, the dark mark reactivating, the spoken words. Amelia listened, her mind already racing ahead. A specific cell. A specific prisoner. The mark acting as a two-way conduit, not just a brand. She stood. This changes the game. The connection is not passive. It can be used for surveillance. For communication. We must act. How? By cutting the signal at its source. Her eyes were like chips of flint. If a prisoner in Azkaban is using a dark mark to connect to you, then that prisoner is a direct threat to a ward of the Ministry. That gives me legal authority for an intervention that bypasses normal review. I am going to Azkaban. Tonight. No. The Dementors, the despair, are under Ministry control, she said, but the set of her jaw betrayed her own dread. And I will not have you tormented in your sleep by a madman in a cell. This ends now. She marched him back to bed, summoning a calming draft from the family stores. Sleep. Medea will be here first thing to help you shore up your mental defenses. I will be back by midday. He wanted to protest, to beg her not to go into that terrible place because of him. But the memory of his parents' love, still glowing within him, gave him a strange courage. She was doing this to protect that love's legacy. To protect him. Be careful, he whispered as she turned to leave. She paused at the door, looking back. In the dim light, she looked less like the indomitable director of the DMLE, and more like a very tired woman who had lost too much and was determined not to lose again. Always. He didn't sleep. He lay awake, the empty file clutched in one hand, the river stone in the other, watching the dawn bleed into the sky. He had touched true darkness, and it had known his name. But he had also touched a light that darkness could never extinguish. The battle was no longer just outside the walls. It was inside his own mind. And for the first time, he had a weapon to fight it with that wasn't a shield or a spell. It was a memory. Of love. And it was unbreakable. Chapter 13. The Reckoning in Stone. The dawn that broke was thin and watery, doing little to dispel the chill that had settled in Harry's bones. He dressed mechanically, the empty file now on a chain around his neck, a silent, weightless reminder. The river stone was a comforting bulge in his pocket. He felt hollowed out, scraped raw by the night's visions, yet simultaneously anchored by the afterglow of his parents' memory. It was a confusing, dissonant state. Medea Selwyn arrived as promised, her cedar and snow presence a shock of calm in the tense manner. She took one look at Harry's face and led him not to the library, but to the solarium, where the weak morning sun filtered through glass. You have been invaded, she stated, her melodic voice devoid of its usual softness. Not by a probe, but by a broadcast. A violent, targeted emission of thought and emotion. Your occlumency walls are designed to keep intruders out. They are less effective against a poisoned radio signal bleeding through the cracks. She had him close his eyes and describe the architecture of his mind in the moment of the vision. The tower, the stag, the hallway of locked doors. The connection came through the scar, Harry said. It didn't feel like it tried to get in. It just was there. Like a door I didn't know was open. Then we must find that door and seal it, Medea said. But not with a simple lock. With a filter. A purification. We will build a gatekeeper. For the next 2 hours, she guided him through an intense mental exercise. They didn't reinforce the tower. Instead, they worked on the pathway leading to it, the main hall of his consciousness. At the very entrance, where the foreign presence had manifested, she had him construct a new guardian. Not the silver stag, which was a creature of light and watchfulness. This was to be something more abstract, more functional. A sentinel of discernment. Visualize a pool of perfectly still, clear water, Medea instructed, her voice a hypnotic guide. A mirror pool. Any thought, any memory, any external impulse that enters your mind must pass over this pool. If it is yours, it passes through unchanged, reflected truly. If it is foreign, if it carries the taint of that other consciousness, the water will ripple. It will show the intrusion for what it is. And it will not let it pass. It will dissolve it, turning the dark energy into harmless mist. Harry concentrated, weaving the image with his will. The floor of his mental hallway shimmered and became dark, polished obsidian. A pool formed, its surface so still it was like a sheet of black glass. He imbued it with the concept of discernment, of purity, drawing on the feeling of the memory of light, the clarity of that perfect love. As the pool solidified in his mind's eye, a profound sense of order settled over him. The chaotic, lingering fear from the vision began to sort itself. His own terror went into the room of recent trauma. The hatred from the prisoner was recognized as foreign, and as he focused on it, the black pool in his hallway rippled, a faint, oily swirl appearing on its surface before dissipating. The emotional residue lessened. Excellent, Medea murmured, a note of genuine surprise in her voice. You have a gift for this, Harry. For imposing order on chaos. It is the same talent that lets you build shields. You are creating internal architecture. When the session ended, Harry felt more clear-headed than he had in days. The psychic attack had been terrible, but he had not been passive. He had learned, adapted, built a new defense. He was fortifying the mind as Amelia fortified the manor. He found Susan in the kitchen, helping Mipsy prepare a tray. Her eyes were shadowed. Auntie's not back, she said, her worry plain. She will be, Harry said, with a conviction he didn't entirely feel. He picked up a knife and began helping Susan chop vegetables for a stew, the mundane task a relief. They were up to their elbows in potatoes when the fireplace in the drawing room roared with green flame. Both children dropped everything and ran. Amelia stepped through, and the sight of her stopped them cold. She was unharmed, physically. But she looked aged. The lines on her face were etched deeper, and her eyes held a bleak, hollow look Harry had never seen before. Her robes, usually impeccable, were dusted with a fine, gray ash that smelled of salt and sorrow. She moved stiffly, as if her bones ached. Aunt Amelia, Susan cried, rushing forward but stopping short, hesitant to touch the grim figure. Amelia blinked, as if returning from a great distance. Her gaze found Harry, and some of the bleakness was pushed back by a fierce, protective fire. It is done. What happened? Harry asked, his voice small. She didn't answer directly. Instead, she walked to the sideboard and poured 3 fingers of a dark amber liquor, drinking it in one swift gulp. She shuddered, then turned to face them. The prisoner was Antonin Dolohov, a high-ranking Death Eater, convicted for the torture and murders of Gideon and Fabian Pruitt, among countless others. A man of singular cruelty and power. Her voice was flat, factual. He had, through a combination of madness, obsessive hatred, and the unique magical pollution of Azkaban, managed to pervert the function of his dark mark. He was using it as a focusing lens, channeling the ambient despair of the prison and his own fixations through the connection he shares with you, Harry. It was how he knew of the attack. How he saw you. She set the glass down with a sharp click. I confronted him in his cell. The Dementors were held at bay by a contingent of Aurors under the expecto patronum of Alistair Moody. Even so, the despair in that place is a physical weight. She paused, her eyes seeing something far away. I performed a modified, ministry-sanctioned Legilimens probe. I saw his memories of the connection. Of focusing on your scar. I also saw enough of his other plans to justify the sentence. Sentence. Susan whispered. Under Emergency Powers Act 3, Clause 17, a prisoner who constitutes an ongoing, irredeemable threat to a protected ward of the state, and who is using dark magic to do so, can be subject to magical nullification. Amelia's words were like stones dropped into a still pond. I oversaw the procedure myself. Antonin Dolohov no longer possesses a magical core. He is a squib. He will live out his days in Azkaban, feeling the full, unmediated horror of the Dementors, with no magic to even warm his blood. He is now, truly, only what he made of himself, a hollow man filled with hate, in a cage of his own making. The cold, brutal finality of it stole the air from the room. Harry understood. She hadn't killed him. She had done something, in its way, worse. She had unmade him as a wizard. It was a punishment of terrifying, poetic justice. And she had done it for him. The weight of that settled on Harry's shoulders, heavy and complex. Gratitude mixed with a sharp, vicarious horror. The connection, he managed to ask, severed. With his magic gone, the dark mark is inert. The link is broken. You should have no more visions from that source. She finally looked at him, really looked at him. The scar may still pain you. The historical connection remains. But the active broadcaster is silent. Silence filled the drawing room, thick and uncomfortable. Susan stared at her aunt as if seeing a stranger. Harry saw not a monster, but a soldier who had walked into hell and done a terrible, necessary thing to protect what was hers. He saw the cost of it etched in the new bleakness behind her eyes. "Thank you," he said, the words utterly inadequate. Amelia gave a single, sharp nod. Then her knees buckled, just slightly. She caught herself on the back of a chair. "Auntie." Susan was at her side in an instant. "I am tired," Amelia admitted, the admission itself shocking. The Dementors, even with a Patronus, their influence is insidious. It lingers. She took a deep, steadying breath, visibly pulling the fragments of her composure back together. "Mipsy. A bath. And then I will rest. Lessons are cancelled for the remainder of the day. You are both to stay inside." She allowed Susan to steer her from the room, leaving Harry alone with the ghost of her deed in the ashes of Azkaban dusting the hearth rug. He wandered back to the kitchen, to the half-chopped vegetables. He picked up the knife and finished the potato, his movements precise. The world felt sharper, more dangerous, but also clearer. The enemy had a name. A punishment had been delivered. A line had been drawn in the stone of the law, in blood and nullified magic. That evening, a different kind of missive arrived. A formal, parchment scroll delivered by a ministry owl. Amelia, looking somewhat restored after a bath and several hours of sleep, broke the seal and read it. Her lips thinned. "A summons," she said. "From the Wizengamot. To answer questions regarding my extreme and unprecedented use of the nullification clause on a prisoner without a full tribunal. Lucius Malfoy has called for a hearing. He is framing it as an abuse of power, a step towards authoritarianism." She didn't seem surprised. If anything, a familiar, combative light returned to her eyes. "He moves quickly. He knows Dolohov was a link to you, to the attack. He seeks to discredit me, to paint me as unstable, overzealous. To weaken my position before I can use the evidence from Dolohov's mind against his other friends in that prison." "What will you do?" Susan asked, her face pale. "I will testify," Amelia said, rolling the scroll back up with a crisp motion. "I will present the evidence of the psychic attack on a child. I will detail the security breach at my home. I will remind them that the law exists to protect the innocent, and that I acted within its strictest letter to do so. And I will make it clear that any who stand against me in this are siding with a terrorist who tortured children in their sleep." She looked at Harry. "You will accompany me, not to testify, to be seen. The Wizengamot needs to remember that this is not an abstract political game. This is about a boy who has been attacked in his bed, in his mind, and in his home. They need to look at you, and remember what they are supposedly fighting for." The hearing was set for 3 days' time. The interval was spent in intense preparation. Amelia worked with her legal team, rehearsing her testimony, anticipating Malfoy's arguments. Harry's lessons with Figworth became cram sessions on Wizengamot procedure, etiquette, and the names and leanings of every important member. The night before the hearing, Harry stood before the mirror in his formal robes, the Potter ring heavy on his finger. He didn't see a victim. He saw a focal point. A reason. He touched the empty file at his throat, then the stone in his pocket. Light and earth, love and law. He retreated into his mind, to the obsidian pool at the entrance. It was still, reflecting the image of his own determined face back at him. No foreign ripples. The door was sealed. The next morning, they flowed to the ministry. The Wizengamot chambers were nothing like the bright atrium. They were deep in the bedrock of London, a vast, dungeon-like room lit by torches. Tiered benches of dark wood rose in a circle around a central floor. The air was old, thick with the smell of dust, polish, and centuries of power brokering. Witches and wizards in plum-colored robes embroidered with a silver W filled the benches, their faces a sea of curiosity, hostility, or careful neutrality. At the front, on a raised dais, sat elderly witch with a face like a befuddled vulture, Madame Griselda Marchbanks, acting chief warlock for the session. Amelia, in her black director's robes, stood at a lectern in the center. Harry and Susan were seated in a small, enclosed gallery to the side, a place for witnesses and observers. He could feel hundreds of eyes on him, but he kept his gaze fixed on Amelia, using his occlumency to maintain a calm, neutral exterior. The hearing began with dry formalities. Then Lucius Malfoy, resplendent in robes of peacock blue, rose from his bench. His voice was oily, reasonable. "Madam Bones, while we all applaud your vigor in protecting your ward, surely the permanent destruction of a wizard's core is a punishment not seen since the days of the witch hunts. Does this not set a dangerous precedent? That the director of magical law can, on her own authority, unmake a citizen?" Amelia didn't flinch. The subject was not a citizen, Mr. Malfoy. He was a convicted terrorist serving multiple life sentences. The law in question, which you helped draft in the post-war security fervor, I might add, is specifically for ongoing threats. Antonin Dolohov was using dark magic to psychically assault a child under the protection of the ministry. He was a weapon, still firing from his cell. I disarmed him. Permanently. Psychic assault. Malfoy's eyebrow arched skeptically. A convenient claim, difficult to prove. Perhaps the boy is simply prone to nightmares. A tragic result of his history, but not evidence of a conspiracy from a maximum security prison. Amelia's smile was thin and sharp. I have submitted the diagnostic reports from a licensed legilimens, Medea Selwyn, detailing the magical residue of the attack in Mr. Potter's mind. I have also submitted the memories extracted from Dolohov himself, attesting to his intent and method. They are available for review by any Wizengamot member who wishes to see the evidence for themselves. A murmur ran through the chamber. Offering memories was a bold move, implying utter confidence. Malfoy pressed on, shifting tactics. And the security at your home, Madam Bones. A successful breach by 3 attackers. Could it be that your dramatic actions are an attempt to cover for your own department's failures? To create a scapegoat in a broken prisoner to explain away your inability to protect the boy yourself? It was a low blow. Harry saw Susan stiffen beside him, her hands clenching. Harry felt a surge of hot anger, but he channeled it down, into the pool in his mind. It rippled, but with his own, justified emotion, not foreign hate. Amelia's voice, when she spoke, was dangerously quiet. The breach is under investigation. The wards were weakened by a complex, blood-based ritual magic that suggests insider knowledge. That investigation is ongoing, and I assure you, Mr. Malfoy, it will follow the evidence wherever it leads. She paused, letting the implication hang in the air, an implication that pointed to old, pure-blood families with knowledge of such rituals. As for protecting Harry Potter, I made a choice. To raise him in the light, to train him, to integrate him into our world. Not to hide him in a hole. That choice carries risk. A risk I calculated, and one I continue to mitigate with every tool the law provides. Including the tool I used on Dolohov. She turned from Malfoy, addressing the full chamber. This is not about precedent. It is about principle. Do we protect our children, or do we coddle their tormentors? Do we allow the weapons of our defeated enemies to be turned on the next generation from behind prison walls? I acted to sever a tangible threat. I would do so again. And I would urge this body to consider that any witch or wizard who finds my actions excessive should examine which side of that principle they stand on. She sat down. The chamber erupted in debate. Shouts, accusations, gavel pounding from Madame Marchbanks. Harry watched it all, his heart pounding. It was a different kind of duel. A battle of words, of influence, of moral posturing. Amelia stood alone in the center, unbowed, a pillar of grim resolve. After what felt like hours, the Wizengamot voted. It was not a public ballot, but a roll call of names. One by one, voices rang out. Aye, for upholding Amelia's action. Nay, for condemning it. The tally was close, painfully close. But when the last name was called, Madame Marchbanks announced the result. By a margin of 7 votes, the actions of Madame Amelia Bones are upheld as lawful and justified. A wave of relief, so intense it was dizzying, washed over Harry. He looked at Amelia. She showed no triumph, only a steely satisfaction. She had won. The law had held. As they filed out, Lucius Malfoy passed their gallery. His cold gray eyes met Harry's for a fleeting second. There was no hatred, no fury. Only a calculating, icy reassessment. He had lost this battle, but the war was far from over. He gave a slight, mocking incline of his head, then swept away. Outside the chamber, in the relative quiet of a marble corridor, Amelia placed a hand on Harry's shoulder. Her touch was firm, grounding. You see, she said, her voice low. The fortress is not just stone and spell. It is precedent. It is the will to stand and fight, even here, in this den of ambition and fear. Today, we held the line. Harry looked up at her, at the woman who had faced dementors and political wolves for him. He thought of the hollowed-out prisoner in Azkaban, of the whispered hatred, of the love in a memory file, of the obsidian pool in his mind. The lines were drawn. In stone, in law, in his own soul. He was not just being protected. He was learning what it meant to hold the line himself. And he was ready. Chapter 14. The Ties That Bind. The victory in the Wizengamot was a strategic gain, not a peace treaty. The air in Bones Manor remained charged, the heightened security a constant hum in the background. But something had shifted within Harry. Watching Amelia defend her actions, defend him, with such unflinching conviction had solidified a resolve that went beyond survival. He wasn't just learning to endure his destiny, he was beginning to understand the shape of the duty that came with it. His training evolved once more. The attack and its aftermath had exposed a weakness, isolation. They were a fortress, but a fortress could be besieged. Connections, Amelia argued, were a different kind of defense. It was time to build bridges. The first bridge was to the Longbottom family. The mention of them in the refusal to the Malfoys had not been an idle excuse. Augusta Longbottom, Neville's formidable grandmother, was an old ally of Amelia's from their own school days, a woman whose sense of duty and tradition was carved from the same stern granite. An invitation was sent and accepted. On a blustery autumn afternoon, Augusta Longbottom arrived, a tall, stately witch wearing a vulture-topped hat and an expression that could curdle milk. Beside her, clutching a small potted plant like a lifeline, was a round-faced, nervous boy with sandy hair, Neville. Introductions in the drawing room were painfully formal. Augusta's gaze swept over Harry, lingering on his scar with a look not of awe, but of grim recognition. "So you're the Potter boy," she said, her voice like cracking ice. "Amelia speaks highly of your progress. I trust you are applying yourself. Idleness is the devil's workshop." "Yes, ma'am," Harry said, echoing the polite tone he'd used at the garden party. Neville mumbled something unintelligible, his eyes fixed on his own shoes. Susan, ever the diplomat, stepped forward. "Neville, is that a Mimbulus Mimbletonia? I've read about them. Can I see?" Neville's head jerked up, a flicker of surprised pride in his eyes. It's a cutting from my great-uncle Algy," he stammered, holding the odd, cactus-like plant a little tighter. "It's quite rare." While Susan engaged Neville in hesitant botanical talk, Amelia and Augusta retired to the study for adult conversation, which Harry knew meant discussing security, politics, and the benefits of aligning their two ancient, light families. Left in the drawing room with tea and cakes, the three children sat in awkward silence. Harry watched Neville, who seemed to be trying to vanish into the armchair. He recognized that look, the fear of being seen, of being found wanting. "Susan says you're good with herbology," Harry ventured, grasping for a topic. Neville flinched, as if the words were an accusation. I'm all right. Gran says I should be better. My magic's a bit slow. Harry's magic is too fast, Susan said with a gentle smile. He sets things on fire when he's not concentrating. Maybe you could teach each other patience. It was a kind lie, and Harry was grateful. Neville looked between them, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. I could show you the Mimbulus Mimbletonia's defensive pulsation. If you like. It's quite harmless, really, just smelly. They spent the next hour in a disused potting shed, away from prying adult eyes. Neville, on familiar ground, transformed. His hands were sure and gentle as he explained the plant's care. When he demonstrated its defensive mechanism, a spurt of stinking sap, Susan squealed with laughter and Harry grinned, the ordinary, silly moment a precious relief. Neville beamed, a real, unguarded smile. Later, as the Longbottoms prepared to leave, Augusta fixed Harry with her piercing gaze once more. You will look out for Neville at Hogwarts. The world is not kind to quiet boys. You have a name that commands attention. Use it wisely. It wasn't a request. It was an order, and an acknowledgement. He was being given a responsibility, folded into the network of obligation and protection that bound the old families together. I will, Mrs. Longbottom. Neville gave Harry a shy, hopeful look as they left, a silent understanding passing between them. They were both children carrying heavy legacies. Maybe they didn't have to carry them alone. The second bridge was more unexpected. A letter arrived from Remus Lupin. Amelia read it at the breakfast table, her expression unreadable. He's heard, through Doge, about the attack in the Wizengamot hearing. He's living, roughly. But he offers his services. He was a friend of your parents, and an exceptional student of defense against the dark arts. He proposes to visit, to share stories of them, and to assess your defensive training. Remus Lupin? Susan asked. She caught herself. Yes, Amelia said curtly. His condition is managed. He is a good man who has been dealt a poor hand. And he knew James and Lily as few others did. I am inclined to accept. His perspective would be valuable. Harry's heart thumped against his ribs. A friend of his parents. Someone who had actually laughed with them, fought alongside them. Remus Lupin arrived on a rainy evening, looking far younger than Harry expected but also terribly worn. His robes were shabby but clean, his brown hair streaked with gray, his face gentle and tired. But his eyes, when they landed on Harry, held a warmth and a sorrow so profound it stole Harry's breath. Harry, Lupin said, his voice soft. You look so much like James. But you have Lily's eyes. They talked in the library, a fire crackling in the grate. At first, it was stilted, with Amelia present, a silent guardian. Lupin told harmless, funny stories, James's hopeless attempts to cook while at school, Lily's legendary temper when someone misshelved a library book. But as the evening wore on and Amelia, seeing Harry's rapt attention, subtly withdrew to her desk to work, the stories deepened. He spoke of their loyalty, their bravery. Of James's unshakable confidence that masked a deep, protective love for his friends. Of Lily's fierce intelligence and her capacity for forgiveness. She was the best of us, Lupin said, his gaze distant. The moral center. James would have followed her anywhere. We all would. Then, hesitantly, Lupin asked about Harry's training. Harry demonstrated his shield charm, his disarming spell. Lupin watched, his analytical gaze missing nothing. You have remarkable power, and control for your age, he said. Amelia has done well. But I see the Bones methodology, practical, direct, legal. Your father, his magic had a flair. A creativity. He was an exceptional duelist because he was unpredictable. He and Sirius, Lupin stopped, pain flashing across his face. They improvised. They turned the environment into a weapon in ways that drove professors mad. It was a different kind of defense. Not just stopping a curse, but turning the fight on its head. He spent the next day working with Harry in the training room, not on new spells, but on applications. He had Harry use Flipendo not just to knock a dummy back, but to topple a bookcase behind it, creating cover. He taught him a variant of the Lumos charm so bright it could briefly blind an opponent, Lumos Solum. It was about cunning, about using an opponent's expectations against them. Your mother, Lupin said as Harry panted after a particularly grueling session, was a mistress of elemental and protective magic. There's a story, during a particularly nasty skirmish, she was cornered. Instead of a shield, she transfigured the stone floor at her feet into a thicket of brambles and thorny roses, then set them on fire with a whispered charm. She didn't just block the attack, she created a zone no one could enter. Defense through beautiful, terrifying denial. Harry listened, enthralled. This was his heritage, not just a list of spells, but a way of thinking. A legacy of clever, fierce, loving magic. On his last evening, Lupin gave Harry a small, wrapped package. Inside was a folded, moving photograph. It showed 4 boys in Hogwarts uniforms, laughing around the base of a large tree. A younger, healthier Lupin, a boy with unruly black hair and glasses making a rude gesture at the camera. James, a handsome, dark-haired boy with a rebellious grin, Sirius Black, and a smaller, rounder boy looking slightly anxious but smiling, Peter Pettigrew. On the back, in faded ink, it read, "The Marauders, 76. They were your family too, Harry," Lupin said quietly. "Flawed, brilliant, and they loved you before you were born. Remember that. You come from love. Never let the world make you hard enough to forget that." After Lupin left, Harry felt both fuller and more hollow. The stories were a gift, but they emphasized the vast, silent void where a family should have been. He spent that night in the library, not studying, just holding the photograph, watching his father laugh. A few days later, the third and most crucial bridge was built, not by invitation, but by necessity. Amelia called Harry to her study, her face grave. The investigation into the ward breach has yielded a result. The blood ritual used to weaken the defenses required a component from a living relative of the property's owner. A bone. Harry felt cold. A bone. Not taken by force, given, or stolen from a resting place. The magic traces point to a distant, disgraced cousin of the Bones line, Cuthbert Bushwick. A man with a grudge against the main family, and known sympathies for the old ways. He is currently residing in a small hamlet in Wales. Dawlish is preparing a team to bring him in for questioning. She studied Harry. This is the other side of legacy, Harry. The dark threads in the tapestry. Families are not monolithic. They contain heroes and traitors, the loyal and the vengeful. To protect this house, I may have to condemn a man who shares my blood. Do you understand? He did. It was the cost of the walls. Sometimes you had to guard against threats from within your own history. I want to come, he said, surprising himself. Amelia's eyebrows shot up. Absolutely not. It's an arrest operation. It could be dangerous. Not to the arrest. To the aftermath. To see it. To understand what protecting a legacy really means. The whole cost. He met her gaze, trying to project a maturity he didn't entirely feel. You said I needed to understand the world I'm defending. All of it. She considered him for a long, silent minute. You will stay with Dawlish. You will follow his orders without question. You will be a spectator, nothing more. Is that clear? Yes, ma'am. The operation was a swift, clinical affair in the dead of night. A small, run-down cottage in a misty Welsh valley. Dawlish and 2 other Aurors moved with silent precision, wands drawn. Harry watched from under a disillusionment charm a safe distance away, his heart in his throat. There was no dramatic fight. The door was blown in. Shouts of, "Department of Magical Law Enforcement." A brief scuffle, a flash of light, and it was over. Dawlish emerged, escorting a frail, bitter-looking old man in stained nightclothes, his wrists bound in magical cuffs. Cuthbert Bushwick's eyes, filled with a venomous hate, scanned the darkness as if he could sense the watching Bones air. As they led him to the waiting ministry carriage, Bushwick spat onto the damp grass. "Tell Amelia she wins nothing. She guards an empty title and a doomed boy. The true blood will out. It always does." Then his eyes, somehow, found the shimmer where Harry stood. They weren't hateful anymore. They were pleading, desperate. "He's in your head, boy. He's in your blood. You can't wall him out forever. We are all just pieces on the board." Dawlish shoved him into the carriage, silencing him with a spell. The night was quiet again, just the sigh of the wind in the grass. Back at the manor, Harry felt changed. He had seen the price. He had met the enemy within the family. He had looked into the eyes of a man whose hatred was born of perceived disinheritance, of twisted pride. He went to the East Wing, to the cabinet. He didn't touch the ward keystone. He looked at the other artifacts, the whistle, the dagger, the compass. Each represented a piece of the Bones legacy, warning, defense, guidance. And now, he understood, the legacy also included the shame of a Blashwick in cuffs. He returned to his room and took out the marauder's photograph. 4 friends, bound by love and magic. He looked at his Potter ring. A legacy of protection and courage. He touched the empty file. A legacy of love. He was tied to all of it, the light and the dark, the loyal and the treacherous, the love and the hate. The threads of his life were woven from countless legacies, pulling him in different directions. He couldn't choose his threads. But he could choose how he wove them. He sat on his bed, the river stone in one hand, the photograph in the other, and began the deliberate, careful work of occlumency. Not to shut out the world, but to order it. The love went into a new, brightly lit room in his mind. The warnings from Lupin, the responsibility from Augusta, went into an armory. The bitter hate from Blashwick was sealed away, but not ignored. It was a lesson, a reminder of vigilance. He was not just a fortress to be defended. He was a tapestry being woven. And he was starting to see the pattern. It was complex. It was messy. It was full of light and shadow. But it was his. And he would protect every precious, complicated thread of it. Chapter 15. The foundation of what comes next. Winter arrived at Bones Manor with a silent, heavy fall of snow. It blanketed the scarred grounds, softening the edges of the world, muffling sound until the house itself seemed to hold its breath. The first anniversary of Harry's rescue approached, a milestone that felt both like a lifetime and the blink of an eye. He stood at his bedroom window, watching the twilight bleed into the snow-blanketed landscape, the Potter ring a familiar, cool weight on his finger, the empty file a light touch against his chest. So much had changed. The scrawny, terrified boy from the cupboard was gone, replaced by someone who still felt too small for the world he occupied, but who no longer felt like a leaf in the wind. He had a foundation. Stone and spell, law and love, memory and might. The term at Hogwarts loomed on the horizon, a little over half a year away. It was no longer a distant dream, but a tactical objective. Preparations intensified, but their nature shifted. The frantic, reactive training gave way to refinement, to consolidation. Amelia called it, shaping the weapon to its purpose. His days were a symphony of disciplines. Mornings began with Medea, where his mental fortress was no longer a construction site but a functioning citadel. The obsidian pool filtered his thoughts with serene efficiency. The silver stag patrolled the corridors of his mind, a serene, powerful presence. The tower room was a sanctuary of pure, quiet self. He had even built a small, sunlit gallery for Lupin's stories and the moving photograph, a place to visit when he needed to remember where he came from. Afternoons were split. 2 days a week were for politics and law with Figworth and Amelia, dissecting Wizengamot cases, understanding the levers of ministry power. The other days were for magic. His combat drills with Rookwood were less about new spells and more about fluidity, about making the shield, the disarmor, the trip jinx as instinctive as breathing. He could now duel 2 advanced training dummies simultaneously, using the environment, using misdirection, his holly wand an extension of his guardian's will. And there were the quiet afternoons with Susan, often in the greenhouses. His healing magic, sparked by her suggestion, had become a surprising point of focus. Under the guidance of a kind Medowitch named Eunice, he learned to mend broken stems, to soothe agitated Bundamans, to produce a Vulnera Saniter that closed shallow cuts with a whisper. This magic felt different, deeply peaceful, a constructive counterpoint to the destructive potential of Firmamento. It was the other half of the Praesidium's oath, to mend what was broken. One such afternoon, as they repotted venomous tentaculous seedlings under Eunice's watchful eye, Susan spoke without looking up from her work. "You're different, you know. From when you came." Harry paused, a root ball cradled in his hands. "How? You're not waiting anymore for the other shoe to drop. You're just here, doing the work." He considered that. The constant, low-grade terror of Privet Drive was gone. The acute panic after the attacks had faded into a watchful readiness. "I suppose I know what I'm fighting for now. And that I can actually fight." Susan nodded, a smudge of dirt on her nose. "Aunt Amelia says that's the Bones way. We don't hope for the best. We prepare for the worst, and in doing so, we make the best possible outcome, likely." It was a good summary. Hope was not a passive thing, it was a wall you built, a skill you honed, a law you upheld. A few days before Christmas, an unexpected visitor arrived via the flow, Albus Dumbledore. He emerged from the green flames not in star-spangled robes, but in deep midnight blue, his beard frosted with snow from some other journey. He carried a sense of weary power, like a great old tree after a storm. Amelia received him in her study, Harry present at her insistence. The headmaster's eyes, twinkling once more but with a new layer of assessment, took in Harry, his posture, the calm in his eyes, the holly wand peeking from a pocket. Amelia. Harry, Dumbledore greeted. I come bearing no arguments, only observations, and a gift. We are listening, Amelia said, her tone guarded but not hostile. The whispers from Azkaban have ceased. The political winds, while chill, are blowing in a direction of stability, for now. You have done what I thought impossible. You have made Harry Potter both safe and strong, out in the open. He sighed, a sound of genuine concession. I underestimated you, Amelia. And I underestimated the boy. Your way has merit. It was as close to an apology as Dumbledore would likely ever give. Amelia inclined her head, a regal acceptance. My observation, Dumbledore continued, is that the connection, while dormant, is not dead. The scar is a fact. And the prophecy, however one interprets it, remains a part of the magical landscape. He will be a target at Hogwarts, not just from the shadows, but from curiosity, from ambition, from misplaced worship. We are aware, Amelia said. He will be prepared. I do not doubt it. Dumbledore's gaze settled on Harry. Which brings me to the gift. Not a weapon, nor a shield. But a map. He drew a familiar, worn piece of parchment from his robes and offered it. This was confiscated from your father, Harry, many years ago. I believe it is time it was returned to its rightful owner. Harry took it. The parchment was blank. He felt a faint, mischievous hum of magic from it, a magic that felt oddly like the laughter in the Marauder's photograph. It requires a specific phrase to activate, Dumbledore said, a hint of a smile in his eyes. I suspect you will discover it in time. It reveals that which is hidden. A tool for guardians, I think, as much as for marauders. He turned to go, then paused. The foundation you have built here is strong, Harry. Stronger than I imagined. Remember, at Hogwarts, you will be more than a student. You will be a standard. How you bear that will influence many. You have been given the tools of a soldier and a statesman. I hope you will also find time to be a boy. Your father, for all his faults, never forgot how to laugh. With a final nod, he stepped into the flow and was gone. Harry looked down at the blank parchment. A map. A tool. He tucked it away, a mystery for another day. Christmas at the manor was a quiet, solid affair. There were no mountains of presents, but thoughtful gifts. From Amelia, a set of finely crafted, dragon hide protective bracers engraved with intertwining badgers and lions. From Susan, a book on advanced protective herbology. From Mipsy, a never-ending supply of his favorite treacle tart. Harry had used his pocket money, drawn from the vast Potter vault with Amelia's guidance, to buy gifts, a new, self-inking eagle feather quill for Susan, a rare, legal text on international extradition laws for Amelia that made her actually smile, and a tiny, enchanted gardener's set for Mipsy that made the elf weep with joy. They ate a hearty meal, and for a few hours, the weight lifted. They were just a family by a fire, the snow falling softly outside the diamond-paned windows. That night, as Harry lay in bed, he took out the blank parchment. He turned it over in his hands, feeling its magic. A phrase to activate it. A map that reveals what is hidden. He thought of his father, of the marauders. What would they have said? Not something obvious. Something insolent. Something full of life. He drew his wand, almost without thinking, and tapped the parchment. I solemnly swear I am up to no good. The parchment shivered. Lines of ink, fine and sure, spread from the point of his wand tap like spreading roots, then like blossoming branches. A perfect, detailed map of Bones Manor unfolded before his eyes. Not just the floors and walls, but every secret passage Susan had shown him, the servant's hatch, the location of the artifact cabinet, even the patrol routes of the Aurors outside, marked as tiny, moving footprints labeled, Dawlish, Savage. In the library, a dot labeled, Amelia Bones, sat motionless. In the room next to his, a dot labeled, Susan Bones, was asleep. He stared, awestruck. It was a guardian's dream. Total awareness. He whispered, mischief managed, and the map faded to blankness once more. A fierce, proud grin spread across his face. His father's legacy. A tool for protection, for vigilance. He hid the map under his mattress, a secret weapon and a cherished heirloom. The winter months passed in a deep, focused calm. Harry's magic settled into its identity. He was a Praesidium. His shields were his strongest spells, but he could now transfigure with purpose, heal with gentle precision, and fight with ruthless efficiency. He understood the Ministry's gears and the Wizengame's currents. His mind was an ordered fortress. Finally, on a bright, cold morning in early spring, Amelia summoned him to her study for what she called his final assessment. There was no test in the training room. Instead, she placed a small, complex puzzle box on her desk, made of interlocking pieces of different woods. This box, she said, contains a single galleon. Your objective is to open it. You may use any means at your disposal, magic, logic, force, guile. But you may not ask for help, and you may not damage the contents. You have 1 hour. She left him alone. Harry approached the box. It hummed with faint, layered magic, wards, locking charms, trick mechanisms. A test of everything. He first tried analytical spells. Revelio showed the internal structure, a labyrinth of moving parts. Finite incantatum had no effect on the permanent enchantments. Arithmancy. Calculations suggested a sequence of pressure points. He tried gentle, precise magic first, guided by his healing instincts, as if persuading the box to open. It resisted. He applied Rookwood's combat logic, looking for weaknesses, for seams. He considered transfiguring a single pin, but the risk to the coin inside was too great. 30 minutes passed. He felt a flicker of frustration, but his occlumency pool remained still. He observed his own emotion, let it pass. He thought of his father's flair, his mother's creativity. Not brute force, but cleverness. He thought of the map. Reveals that which is hidden. He pointed his wand not at the box's locks, but at its very nature. Specialis Revelio. The box glowed. A hidden, almost invisible pattern of runes appeared on one side, a riddle, not a lock. I speak without a mouth and hear without ears. I have no body, but I come alive with wind. What am I? An echo. A voice on the wind. A memory. He didn't speak the answer. He hummed. The lilting, wordless tune from the memory of light, his mother's song. The runes shimmered. The box didn't click open. It unfolded, each piece sliding apart gracefully, harmlessly, revealing the golden galleon within. Amelia re-entered as the last piece settled. She looked at the unfolded box, at the coin, at Harry's calm face. She didn't ask how he did it. She simply nodded. You are ready, she said. Not because you can blast a hole through a wall, or win a duel. But because you understand that power has 1,000 forms, and the correct one depends on the problem. You understand restraint. You understand legacy. You know who you are. She walked to the window, looking out at the grounds where the first brave green shoots were piercing the snow. Hogwarts will be a new kind of battlefield. Softer, but in some ways, more treacherous. You will make friends, and enemies. You will be tested in ways I cannot replicate here. You will have to decide, every day, what kind of wizard, what kind of potter, what kind of bones you will be. She turned to face him, her monocle catching the spring light. I did not take you in to make you a weapon, Harry. I took you in to give you the choice to become a guardian. You have made that choice. You have built your foundation. Now, you must build the house that rests upon it. And you must do it yourself. He understood. The intensive, sheltered training was over. The scaffolding was coming down. He would go to Hogwarts not as a hidden victim, not as a coddled prince, but as himself. Harry Potter, ward of Amelia Bones, Praesidium, a boy with a scar, a legacy, and a formidable will to protect what mattered. He felt no fear, only a steady, humming readiness, like the wards of the manor, like the magic in his holly wand. He had a foundation of stone and silence, of law and light, of memory and might. It was unshakable, and from it, he would build a future. The boy from the cupboard was gone. The wizard was here, and his story was just beginning. The end.